Good afternoon. I'm so glad you're all here. Small audience here. We have about 320 going to be hybrid with us this afternoon. My name is Sarah Cannon. I'm one of the directors of special education. I'll be brief because I really want Sarah Ward to do the work today. But Sarah Ward is from Cognitive Connections in Massachusetts. She's an Arvada West graduate, so if you know her brother, come say hi when she's here. I trained with Sarah about 7 years ago in Jeffco, and it was really a life-changing, and I don't use that term lightly, professional development opportunity where our goal is today you will leave with strategies you can use in your classroom tomorrow. I use Sarah Ward strategies with my son, who has executive functioning challenges, my husband, who has executive functioning challenges. He's a little harder than my son. My son's a little bit more open to this. So I'll turn it over. The presentation is in Sched, so you can access it there. And otherwise, I'll just turn it over to Sarah Ward.
Awesome. I figured I'd get rid of the thing that is clicking on there. There we go. I have to be away from you, I think. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. And welcome everyone who's online. It's always a little bit strange for like my virtual audience. I do always love to share that I am an Arvada West graduate. My maiden name was Rosenall, and my father was an orthodontist in Wheat Ridge. So a lot of times people come up and they're like, your dad straightened my teeth. So if my dad straightened your teeth, very cool. And I always joke that I'm always like, I've got to at some point when I lecture in Colorado, meet someone, I'm buzzing a little bit, I'm not sure where I need to end up, that I graduated with, and so far as I joke, I've only met 5 of my brother's ex-girlfriends. I'm not sure what that says about my brother. But nonetheless, we're going to dive right on in. I would like to ask of my audience here, I don't think I can get it an online example, but how many of you have heard me before? Oh, only a few of you. Wow, interesting. Okay, great. So I'm going to assume maybe it's the same thing for those of you that are online as well. So I did an hour presentation in the district in April of last year. So today what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of back to basics with sort of a deeper dive on executive function, and then that'll be helpful to all of you who have not heard me before. Then we're just going to jump on in. We're going to talk all about time management, class assignments, written expression, self-advocacy, long-term projects. All of that is the plan for this afternoon. So with no further ado, I always love to introduce Kristen Jacobson. She's my co-director at Cognitive Connections. Kristen and I have been working together for 28 years. All of our strategies are kid-tested and mother-approved. She has 3 children, I have 2 children. And Kristen is the co-author of our 360 Thinking program. She's an amazing expert. If you here today and you want to catch up with me and for some reason I don't get back to you, she's a great person to get back to as well. She'll answer all your questions too. So before we start, your handout, and for those of you that are in person, by the way, just a 10-second little housekeeping thing. If you're joining me virtually, I did put a very large electronic handout associated with the virtual session in Schedule, whatever your Sched website is. It's like 107 pages. It has tons of articles, full-page resources, the whole thing. But I made a little goof in that I thought the people that registered in person were registering for something different. So I just made a correction. So I just re-uploaded that. So if you go on to Sched for in-person, all of you that are in person, the correct handout should now be there. But for the most part, it should all follow. So I wanted to let you all know that. But before your handout matches mine, let me just show you a few fancy fun slides just to get everybody warmed up and on the same page. So I was in a 4th grade classroom, and at the start of the 4th transition, the expectation was you'd have out your black social studies folder like you see here. Now the student that I was working with, this is what his desk looked like at the start of the 4th transition. So he's got the black social studies folder, but he'd made a math cube for math, had not gotten around to throwing out all the trash. This is his personal reading book. This is the book from social studies. This is the English language arts binder, and my favorite is, this is the to-do list from the speech pathologist. And every time this kid goes to transition, He can't put away the old things. All the new things accumulate. And can you picture his desk by the end of the day? I mean, it's just an explosion of things. And the thing about it was, the teacher said to me, she goes, well, honestly, she said, normally we have 4 students per table. She said, I've just given him his own table. I thought, okay, well, this is not actually a solution, but it's problematic. And then I was in this classroom, and this is what your desk is supposed to look like. Now, these were weird desks. They were tall on one side and short on the other. But the student that I was observing, this is what their desk looked like. It's a complete black hole. How many of you have seen desks that look like this? Oh yeah, papers everywhere. And then I have a boy who's a junior in high school, and he came to see me. And I said, do you need any help? And he's like, yeah. He goes, I have a biology final on Friday. And I said, all right. Did your teacher give you a study guide? He goes, yeah, just a minute. And he opens up his backpack, and this is what he pulls out of his backpack. Remember, it's May, we're studying for finals, and bless his heart, the most heartbreaking part was, he'd pull out paper after paper, and he'd look at it, and he'd go, oh man, if I turned that in, I could have gotten credit for it. So he had more work that he'd done, and he'd never even passed it in. All right, but do you want the really cringe-worthy part? So it was May, and I did help him get the backpack cleaned out for finals. And then after he left my office, I had to take a picture of the trash can, because this was the holiday gift cookie and Christmas card that he had intended to give to his resource room teacher in December. And it had been in the bottom of the backpack since December. It's like, ugh. But we definitely see this. It's a little bit problematic. And then I had one mom who said, can you do anything about that? So it's not the older ages at all. And my favorite slide, I actually really love to put this one in, is, and let me go back and mention one thing before I show you my other favorite slide. I go to lots of schools and I attend tons of IEP meetings, and these are typically the kinds of goals that I hear. You sit around and they'll say, all right, well, let's put some executive function goals, and they are things like the child will record their homework, organize their backpack, turn in their homework, etc. But this is a very important slide to see. In this classroom, the teacher gave the students 40 minutes to generate 3 paragraphs of output. This is a neurotypical student, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. Now, this student here, same thing, neurotypical, whatever we're calling neurotypical these days. It's the same volume of output, albeit not 3 paragraphs. But the student that I was working with, this is their output in the same 40 minutes. And you must see this with your students, that writing is the bane of existence. You see writing is just the worst. A few head nods. You know, the thing about writing is the ultimate executive function skill. It requires you to hold information in working memory, organize your ideas, record your ideas, all those pieces. Although you have to give this kid credit, it is a pretty rock and bubble title. I mean, at least we got that in there. Shoe shine girl, the whole thing. So now on to one of my favorite slides. I love this one. If you don't know what that is, it's a sloth. Do you ever feel like that with the child in the morning? Come on, at the Cubbies, come on, join us in the classroom, let's go. Or that child transitioning down the hallway. Pacing is just a huge issue, whether it's pacing your work, whether it's pacing the transition, all of those pieces. So we want to make sure that we address that too. So with all of that in mind, our number one goal today is to do a little bit of a deeper dive with the 360 thinking program. Again, I did do a little bit of it when I was here in the district, but we're going to really expand on a portion of that. I know I don't have my virtual audience, but it would help me just really quickly. How many of you work in lower elementary and upper elementary, middle, and then high school? A little bit of everything. Okay, great. I've got strategies for everything. It just helps me kind of get a sense of where I'm at age-wise. So to do this, to introduce you to our 360 thinking program, I find the best way to do this and to get everybody back on the same page. Again, if you've heard part of this before, it'll be your, brief, boring moment for 10 minutes, but I promise we're going to expand all the ideas a little bit farther. Best way to do this is to start in the classroom. And what we're going to do is focus on the little girl in the blue sweater. She has awesome executive function skills. And what happens is the teachers in September, August, September, they always establish the routine. And the purpose of the routine is to create predictability. And this little girl totally knows the routine. She knows that every morning they come in, they do a little morning piece, and then they have morning meeting. And she begins to pull up in her thought bubble because she knows the routine that morning meeting's going to end around 9 o'clock, and then they have writer's workshop. And on writer's workshop on Mondays, which it happens to be a Monday, it's a free write where they just practice getting ideas down on paper. So you can see she's picturing that writer's workshop journal, and she's totally able to size it up. She knows the teacher's expecting, less than a page, not that much information. She knows they have about a half hour to do that, and she's like, what am I going to write about? Oh, I know, I went to a really great birthday party. I wanted to write about that. So she starts to re-experience the birthday party that she went to, and with all of that in mind, she starts to talk herself through it. I know, I'm going to write about that party, and especially those of you that are here as speech pathologists, she clearly has the schema of birthday party. She knows she's going to write about where the party was, the activities she did, how her friend had a cool backpack, and she wants one too. And she's very aware of the teacher expectations. The teacher's expecting an intro sentence in details and expensive words. So she starts to think, what kind of expensive words can I use? With all of that in mind, the minute the teacher says, okay, class, Monday morning, time for writer's workshop, let's go back to our desk, and write about what we did over the weekend, she immediately goes back to her desk. She's aware of the time. She has her plan in mind. She sits down and she starts writing. And that is awesome. And I do not have a single child like that on my caseload. The kids that I work with are a little bit more like this little girl over here. They show up to morning meeting and they still have their coat on. They haven't actually made the transition from the cubby. And this is the kid who kind of has 1 foot in the group, 1 foot out of the group. The teacher makes the announcement, okay, class, Monday morning, time for writer's workshop. Let's go back to our desk. You're going to need your writer's workshop journal and your pencil. And she dismisses the class. And these are the students that are still at the bookshelf. They are often prompt dependent. These are your kids that you have to say, okay, go get your workbook. Okay, go get your pencil. Okay, go sit down. And we describe them as being a beat or 22 beats behind. It's just enough that they need that support to get to where they need to go. So what happens is, notice this girl finally sits down, but she's absolutely not aware of the time. Time is not kind of pulling into her thought bubble, and she doesn't start writing. So as educators, we come up to her and we say, well, what would you like to write about? What did you do this weekend? Remember, it's just a free write. You can write about anything. Do you want to write about soccer? I know you love to play soccer. Did you have a soccer game this weekend? Or you can write about apple picking. I know, that's a big fall thing. Did you go apple picking this weekend? And this girl says out loud or in her own mind, oh, I don't remember what I did this weekend. I don't know what I'm going to write about. I hate writing. I'm a terrible writer. Oh, great. Look, he's writing, right? And there's no initiation. And by the way, just a sidebar, one of the big things that I see too, a lot of our kids with executive function challenges, their past memories are not so great. Those are the kids that you do ask them, what did you do over the weekend? And they just it was fun. I mean, they don't really pull up a lot of those details. Now, this girl still doesn't initiate. So believe me, you will keep asking her questions. Well, remember, it's a free write. You can write about anything I want. Remember how we had that thunderstorm? You can write about the thunder. Or look, you have your puppy you got in the pandemic. How big is the dog now? You can write about your dog. And the whole reason you're doing that is you're trying really hard to get that girl to see something in her mind's eye to write about. The problem is the only thing that little girl sees is that blank piece of paper in front of her. Now, my reminder is that these two girls are crucial examples of executive function because they're demonstrating the presence or the absence of the two key underlying cognitive skills that you have to have for effective executive function skills. And the first is working memory. You have to have working memory, but remember that working memory always occurs with executive function in a very explicit order. It always starts with non-verbal working memory. And non-verbal working memory is that mental thought bubble of what something looks like. And the reason why you need that is it allows you to visualize what it is that you're going to work on so that you can do a skill called conditional reasoning. Now, conditional reasoning is essentially if-then thinking, and if-then thinking is a big deal we're going to talk a lot about today. Well, if I'm doing a free write, then I can write about anything I want. If the teacher's expecting expensive words, then I won't say I hit the piñata, I'll say I whacked the piñata. And I'm using that to then drive my verbal working memory. But what's really important to see, and most of you are familiar with verbal working memory, it's that talking. But the big important one about this is, for this girl, her verbal working memory is absolutely in the form of self-directed talk. And what is even a bigger deal, which we're going to talk a lot about today, is her self-talk is in the form of something called a stated implementation intention. She's literally stating her intent of what she's going to do. I'm going to write about that. I will include those details. Now, if we contrast that with our little girl here, she had no imagery. She wasn't picturing what she was going to write about. She wasn't picturing prior experiences. As a result, she does not have that if-then thinking. And in fact, that's why so many kids at this age, like in that younger kindergarten, 3rd, 4th grade, are often referred to me for highly impulsive behaviors, because they're not stopping to say, well, if I do this, then that. They're not running that scenario. They're just acting on impulse. Do you see these kids as being highly impulsive in those younger grades? Yeah. But this, I always think, is so interesting. This little girl does have verbal working memory. I don't know what I'm going to write about. I hate writing. I'm a terrible writer. I don't even know what I did this weekend. The problem is her verbal working memory is not in the form of self-directed talk. And it's very much kind of like now and not now talking. And I mentioned this earlier, but I don't know if you guys see this. I see so many of my kids like this often present with a very negative, pessimistic, kind of grouchy inner critic voice. Do you see that in your classrooms? It's going to be hard. Why do we have to do that? I don't like that. This is a dumb homework assignment. We really see a lot of that grouchiness. So here is your very first key takeaway point. Executive function always begins with nonverbal working memory. It's what allows us to visualize a plan and to hold on to that plan as it unfolds over time so that we can begin to work towards that. And what's even more important is it begins to develop that if-then thinking, which is critical for planning. So that's the first thing. Remember, I said these kids were demonstrating 2 key things. Now, the second thing is that executive function has no correlation to IQ. In fact, 90% of the time, we identify a student and we say, ooh, send that child out for testing, and they present with average, if not significantly above average intelligence. But executive function, and actually I'll mention this, truly the majority of the kids that I work with in classrooms and in private practice that are my gifted learners, like my twice exceptional students, often they have the worst executive function skills. So if there's no correlation to IQ, here's what we do know. Executive function has a 1-to-1 correlation to SQ. Now, a lot of people know emotional intelligence, and it's not social intelligence. SQ is situational intelligence. And situational intelligence is your ability at any one moment in time to be situationally aware, or to do a skill that we call stop and read the room. And stop conveniently stands for the features of situational awareness, which are space, time, objects, and people. At any one moment in time, we are situationally aware. Space, you all are doing it right now. Space, where am I? I'm in the auditorium. Time, what time is it? What time does this shindig end? Or you're also aware of what time is it now? What time is the next transition? What pace do I need to keep? We are aware of the objects that we need, and we are aware of people. Now, when we read a room, there are 2 ways that we do it. We do it to be situationally aware in a moment, like where am I? What time is it? For example, this girl, where am I? I'm on the rug. What time is it? Morning meeting. Objects, I don't have any objects right now. And with respect to people, we read a room for people, who else is in the room, but even more importantly, and I'll kind of highlight this on my handout or on my slide here, is we read the room for role. Like, what is my job right now? What is it that I need to be doing? So not only are we aware when we're in a moment like this, but we also read the room when we transition. Because I'm being filmed for the virtual audience, I normally would go over there, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go to that doorway. I'm going to pretend this is a doorway. Everybody good with that in my live audience and my virtual audience? The fact of the matter is, kids transition all day long. So they go from the hallway into the classroom, from the rug at morning meeting into the classroom, from their desk into the classroom, from the classroom down the hall to, say, music class. So here's the thing. Every time you're in one space, let's say I'm in the hallway space, and I cross through a doorway to read the room, this is called an entry-exit point. And when we have an entry-exit point, our brain scans the room and reads the room to direct our planning. So to give you a really good example of it, let's imagine that you had a student who was maybe with you as a speech pathologist, and you're transitioning the student to join their class, and let's say the class is in the library. A child with really strong situational intelligence and the capacity to read the room, this is what it looks like. They walk into the room and they say, space, I'm in the library, and we tend to read the room by zones. There's the fact book zone, there's the easy reader book zone, there's the library. All right, so this kid is like, he's like, oh, that's the rug with the black spot. And the teacher's like, it's fine, you can sit on the other side. And the kid's like, hey, I know where Madagascar is. And he walks right through the group and he touches the globe. And the teacher's like, no, we're not talking about Madagascar. Please sit on the rug. And the kid's like, the glare in the window's bad. I'll go close the curtain. The teacher's like, no, you don't need to close the curtain. Just take a seat. And the kid's like, that's my space. I'm not going to sit where the black spot is. You need to move. Do any of you know this child? Yeah. Totally dysregulated. And the problem is, at this point, the teacher's going to have to externally regulate that child. Well, the thing about it then is this. Situational intelligence, again, it's a very early aspect of executive function skills. You have to stop and read the room, but the key thing is, it is self-regulation. It is self-directed, because the student is saying, oh, okay, if that's what's happening now, then this is what I need to look like. And again, it's developing that emergence of that if-then planning. So the second key thing that you have to have is situational intelligence. But as I talked about before, and I kind of want to remind you again, the fact of the matter is that I can do a test and I can measure your nonverbal working memory. Similarly, I can do an evaluation and I can determine your ability to read the room. But with respect to executive function skills, those two skills actually occur simultaneously, right? We walk into a room, we read the room, and visualize what we're going to need to look like. Or in a given situation like this girl, she's situationally aware, space, I'm on the rug, it's going to end at 9 o'clock. Right now I don't have anything, I'm going to need my writer's workshop journal, etc. Remember, the minute you combine those two skills together, it actually becomes a processing skill. And that processing has a very specific name. It is called mimetic ideational information processing. Oh my gosh, that's a mouthful, so don't worry about it. Basically, you mime the idea in your head. You are what we call a mind mime. And I always love that phrase mime, because when I work with adolescents and students and I say, do you know what a mime is? They all tell me the same thing. They're like, yeah, it's the dude that does this. And this is what they show me, or they show me opening a door, or they show me like pulling the rope. And I say, yes, it's that person who's simulating an action with an object, even though the object is not right there. Now, all of you right now are being a mind mime. You are running a mental simulation through your head. And let me give you a really good example of what that is. So even though you're listening to me, at least I hope you're listening to me, and those of you at home are, You're running a movie through your head where you're like, awesome, Sarah stops talking at, 3:20? And you're like, I am just going to quickly go back to my classroom. I needed to print something out and put it on the desk for tomorrow. Then I'm going to leave here. I'm going to swing by Target because I need to pick up a few things. And then I'm going to run into Sprouts, grab dinner for tonight. And then that ought to put me on I-70 around like 5:15. And what does your brain see I-70 looking like at 5:15? It's funny, I see a few of you are like, no. Because what you do is you're like, it's great, and watch what this is. This is the coolest system ever. You can do trial and error with no risk of error. You go, it's great. I go to my classroom, I go over to Target, I get dinner at Sprouts, I hop on the highway, and I'm going to be sitting in major traffic. And then what your brain does is you go, ooh, I can do trial and error with no risk of error. That feels really stressful. I cannot deal with that because I might even be late picking up my child from soccer. So then what you do is you go, forget it. I could actually get in early tomorrow morning and take care of those papers. So I'm just going to hop on the highway as soon as the presentation is over, get home, and as much as I'd love dinner from Sprouts, King Soopers it is tonight. And I'm just going to swing by King Soopers and get the dinner there to avoid the traffic. And your body goes, oh, yeah, that feels a lot less stressful. Do you guys get the idea what I'm talking about? And all day long, we run those plans through our mind. Now, remember, here's why that matters. When you are simulating the future, our brains do 4 things when we simulate, and here's the deal. If you don't teach your students these skills, they'll never be independent. They'll always be dependent upon an adult in their world. So the first thing we do is we make an image of what it's going to look like, all right? So I want you to, and remember, it's driven by situational awareness. So I either, like that little girl, I visualize the page on the Writer's Workshop Journal, or in my example here, I'm picturing Sprouts, the store, okay? Sprouts, there it is. I'm thinking about Sprouts. Now I'm pausing because I really want you to think about that. If all I do is have an image of Sprouts in my mind, is that actually planning? No. The next thing we do is important. We do something called episodic future thinking. And you recognize the word episode, all right? All of us know what an episode is. If I say, what was on the episode last night of Grey's Anatomy, you might reflect it. You all learned in college, episodic memory is our memory of a past event. What we know is that executive function is an episodic future skill. It allows us to run an episode of how the future is going to play out. But what's key about episodic future thinking is it is the skill of self-projection. We have to see ourselves as the actor or actress carrying out that future task that we're imagining. So watch this for a minute. There's Sprouts, and now I see myself at Sprouts. Is that planning? It's closer, but it's still not there. The next one is probably the biggest one of all. We do something called mental spatial time travel. Now, mental spatial time travel is literally where, in our mind's eye, we mentally, spatially travel how we're going to accomplish that goal. So in the example of the little girl, she's picturing that worksheet page, she sees herself writing, and she's envisioning how it's going to go. I'm going to go from the intro to the details, talk about where the party was, the activities like the piñata, and how I want a backpack too. She's pre-imagining how she's going to go point A to point B to point C. You and I did the same thing. How am I going to go from the school to Target, from Target to Sprouts, from Sprouts to the highway? And the entire time that we're envisioning that path, we can physiologically and emotionally feel our bodies moving. If I'm going to be stressed, or if I'm going to have to rush, if I don't want to rush, then I'm either going to have to eliminate something, or I'm going to have to shop faster, or something like that. That's what allows us to talk ourselves through our plan. Well, if I don't want to be late to getting home, then I guess I'll eliminate Target and Sprouts and traffic, and I'll just go home first. So we use that image to guide our planning. So being a mind mime means the following. You make an image. What will it look like? You see yourself. What will I look like? How am I moving? And how does that feel? Now, most often when I do in-person lectures, I always repeat the exact little set, same as slides. Because if you're at home virtually attending and you're zoning out on me, and if you're doing anything else in here, I'm going to forewarn you, the next 3 slides are the most important slides of the whole presentation. There you go. It's like being cued, it's going to be on a test. So I'm going to put the whole thing together for you, and I'm going to be the child who has really terrible executive function skills. Now I'm just going to walk down here for a minute, but I'm going to be quiet for a second because I don't want to like interference with that speaker. So one sec. I knew it was going to happen, so I'll try to be quiet for a minute. All right, now, remember I'm the child who has terrible executive function skills. I stink at this, all right? And I'm downstairs, and I'm finishing up my breakfast, and you're my mom, and you're like, Sarah, honey, it's 7:15. We're out the door by 7:30. Quick, go upstairs and finish getting ready for school. And I look at my mom, and I'm like, I know, Mom. And you're like, well, honey, I can't drive you this morning. You have to take the bus, so quick. Go upstairs, get all your stuff. We've got to go like 15 minutes. We're out the door. And I'm like, I know. And you're like, well, then go. And I'm like, I am. Okay, now, it's not just that I'm doing like the classic teen pushback, but I'm like, fine. Now remember, I'm terrible at this skill, and I'm downstairs, and I start walking through the house, and I'm like, my mom's like, oh, I can't drive you. She could drive me if she wanted to. It's so annoying. All right, now again, I'm kind of mumbling, and the weather's really bad, and I'm so sick of it being so cloudy out. And I'm so tired. And I told my mom I wanted new boots. And she's like, your rain boots from last year are fine. They're not fine. Okay, now, I know, I'm like doing all this mumbling, right? And what happens is I'm mumbling through the house. I get upstairs to my bedroom, and I see my phone, and I grab my phone, and I send a quick Snapchat. And then I'm just going to check Instagram for just a minute. So I go into Instagram, swipe a little bit. Oh, that's a cool app. Matter of fact, my friend told me about that app. I swipe up to go to the app store. Oh, dang it, it costs money. Oh, but you know what? I totally got a gift card from my uncle for my birthday from the iTunes store. Where did I put that gift card that I got? And I start looking in my bedroom for the gift card. Hey, Mom, do you know where that gift card is that Uncle Rob gave me for my birthday? By the way, is this a good time to be looking for the gift card? No, you just told me we're running late. And here's the problem. As this student, I am now 100% dependent upon my mom to come upstairs and say, Sarah, we're out the door now in 10 minutes. Get your homework. There's your backpack. You're going to need a sweatshirt. We're out the door. She's going to have to keep me on pace and on time and prompt me through the steps of what I need to do to kind of like carry out that task. Does that kind of make sense for everything? Now let's take a look at what happens if you have really good executive function skills. So I'm going to do the same thing for a minute. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Okay. Now let's say I'm downstairs, and it's the exact same thing, but I have good executive skills, and you're my dad, and you're like, Sarah, 7:15, we're out the door at 7:30. Quick, upstairs and finish getting ready for school. And I'm like, I know, Dad. And you're like, well, I can't drive you. You have to take the bus. I know. Okay, go. I'm like, all right, fine. Again, I can still give a little pushback. It's not about that. But it's very important to understand that I am downstairs or at the end of the hallway, whatever the situation is. And as I start going through the house, I am a mind mime. So as I'm walking through the house, I make an image of the space that I'm going to my bedroom. What do I look like? I see myself in my bedroom. What's my movement? Well, I know I need to go from my backpack. Hold on one second. There it is. Over to my desk. I know I need to get my homework. I know I need to get my textbook. And I need a sweatshirt because it's going to be cold today. And actually, I don't want to miss the bus because my friend Emily's going to be on the bus. And I get upstairs, and guess what? Before I even put one toe into my bedroom, I've already executed the entire plan in my head. So that the minute I get into my bedroom, I grab my backpack, I get my homework, I get my textbook, I get my sweatshirt, and I'm out the door on time and on pace. And why am I harping? Like, it's the most important slide of the whole presentation. Because here's the reason why. 90% of the time, task planning happens in a different space from where you execute the plan. That's so important, I have to say it again. 90% of the time, we imagine what it is that we're going to do, and we run the plan through our head, so the minute we get to where we're going, we just carry out that plan. The problem is the kids that don't do this, that's why you give them a directive in a class and they're like, cool. They don't rehearse it, and then they're like, oh, shiny object. They go over and they're playing with the shiny object. So the thing about it is, you've got to be rehearsing this plan in your mind. So the thing about it is, that's like a part one. So the foundational skill, let me go back to this for 1 minute. The foundational skill of executive function is being a mind mime. You have to have this. Okay, but that's part one. So let me build on that what the part two is, all right? Because this is a big deal. When you're a kid in elementary school and you're in a classroom like this, and notice the teacher gave the direction on the board, right? Central question, how are sounds made? And this teacher is telling the class what they're going to do. They're going to be making an experiment with this solo cup where they're going to be putting beans inside and foil on top to make a noisemaker. They're going to be recording their observations in their science journal and filling out a worksheet. As she gives those directions, kids with good executive function are a mind mime. And this is what it looks like. Teacher's giving the direction. That little girl goes, okay, got it. Make an image. We're making a noisemaker. What will I look like? I'm gathering those materials. What's my movement? Well, I have to go to the science zone and get the materials. I have to go to the teacher's desk and get my journal. And when I come back to my desk, the worksheet on how to do it will be there. And then she stands up. As the teacher's giving the directions, she's rehearsing where she's going to go so that she can immediately follow that direction. Not the kids that I work with. The kids that I work with, as the teacher's giving that direction, they're just like, you know, my mom makes smoothies in those cups. I'm hungry. They're not planning that, and then you have to be prompt dependent. But remember, and this is what I showed you earlier if you attended a previous lecture, when you're in the classroom, you can see where you're going. I'm going to go there and there and there. But by the time you get to high school and you go to your locker, you're planning for science. The problem is science is down the hall, up the stairs, and down another hallway. So I have to visualize, well, I know what I get in science. We're doing an experiment today. Bring my goggles. I know I have to turn in last night's lab report. Bring that with me. And then I go down the hall to Spanish. I better bring my Spanish workbook. I have to hold in mind what I'm looking at in that future space. And then there's another major transition for kids. When kids are in like pre-K, kindergarten, really they're responsible for the little backpack. Get the backpack to school and just bring it back. But by the time you hit lower elementary, a lot of kids have a homework folder and all the planning is done for them. We're going to leave this at home and bring this right back. And typically kids get home, who takes the homework folder out of the backpack? Moms and dads. So the kid's not even really planning, it's kind of like now and not now. But then all of a sudden, I don't know, 4th grade, 5th grade, we move to an agenda book. And this too is going to be your mantra for the rest of the day. I can't tell you how many kids come to see me and I say, let's take a look at what you have for homework tonight. And they go, okay. And they open up this agenda book and I say, tell me about your homework. And they go, yeah, not much. It's not a bad night at all. I'm like, seriously? Because you have 6 questions and a chapter in science. You have to read an entire chapter and make flashcards in Spanish. You have a problem set in a chapter in math and an entire poster. But I really want you to think about this. If all I do is look at my agenda book or look on Google Classroom and read, I have a math worksheet. Or all I do is read, yeah, I've got math and Spanish and a poster. Am I using verbal working memory or am I using non-verbal working memory? What is it? It's verbal. If you just read it, it's no wonder it's not much because in your mind, you just have 4 things to do. That's not what good executive function is. Good executive function, you rehearse it. You're at your locker, you don't read the homework, you pre-experience it. Well, I know I'm going to be doing homework at home tonight at 4:30. I don't read science. I know I'm answering questions in a textbook. I better bring the textbook home. I know that in Spanish, we have to make flashcards. I better bring my Spanish workbook home. Do you see how that works? You rehearse it to know what you're going to bring with you. Well, here's why that matters and why this is like the part 2, and this is a big deal. The distance between where you are in a moment in time and how far into the future you can see, okay? So watch me again. I'm in the classroom, I can see I'm going to go there, there, and there, as opposed to I'm in my locker, and what am I going to look like down the hall, up the stairs, and down another hallway, as opposed to I'm at my locker, and what am I going to look like doing my homework tonight, and what am I going to look like turning it in? Everyone get the idea of what I'm visualizing? That distance between here and there is called the spatial temporal window, or the spatial temporal capacity. It's how far into the future you have the capacity to visualize. And you want to know what's really scary about it? We have developmental norms for it. So guess how far into the future a 2-year-old can see? Anyone have toddlers at home? That would be now. If you say to a 2-year-old, no, you can't have cookies until after lunch, good luck to you. Because, and I know this is a really creepy visual, at least I think it's a little creepy, but watch me for a minute. Your ability to visualize the future, this thought bubble, that thought bubble is fully developed by 5.5 years of age. But at 2, it's developing. So a 2-year-old doesn't have this. A 2-year-old is like this. Do you know what I mean? That's why they're so impulsive. They can't plan, they can't delay gratification, and so that's why for a 2-year-old, the sky is falling. Everything is now and not now. So the thing is, 3 to 5-year-olds, because this is developing, it's 5 to 20 minutes. So if you teach an early childhood education, that's why in early childhood education, we have like a little 10-minute math center, and then we come back to there's a group, or a little 15-minute like touchy-feely activity, and then we come back together. That's it. Early elementary is several hours, which is why in early elementary school, we have math, we have reading, and then we have snack. Snack isn't just to refresh the kids, it's that's about as far of a routine as they can handle. Now, upper elementary, lower middle school is really 8 to 12 hours, which is why in middle school you can give a student homework and they see themselves doing the work, but they often don't have that plan for turning it in the next day, and why they tend to forget turning it in. And it's why I find, and again, I don't know what you do here in Colorado, but a lot of schools I work in that lower middle school, sometimes they still have like an advisory period or a tab period first thing in the day where kids come in, it's like a 15, 20-minute period. They might review with an advisor what's going on and when do you turn things in, and then they start their classes. All right, those are my high school teachers. Are you ready to brace yourselves for this one? Guess how far into the future high schoolers can see? There it is, 2 to 3 days. Neurologically, that's it. Yeah, I love your jaws dropped. Watch this for a minute. Think about this for a minute. You tell your high schoolers you have an essay due 3 weeks from now. You know what your high schoolers do? They're like, sweet, I have an essay due 3 weeks from now. Whatever. I mean, it's not even in my spatial temporal window. I'm like, I'm good. Now 2 weeks in, they're like, yeah, I got an essay due. And 1 week in, I'm starting to be like, ooh, got an essay due. And all of a sudden, 2 to 3 days before, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have an essay due. And I start to panic a little bit. And to be honest with you, that's totally normal procrastination. Now that I see it and I feel the urgency of it, I mean, don't you all do the same thing? I'm called to action and I'm going to do it. Except, here's where it's a problem, is when I go, oh, it's actually an 8-page essay with a corresponding poster, and I have only 2 days' time to do it. So part of it, too, is look at this one. It's not until you are in, like, upper high school, college, you can see 2 to 3 weeks into the future, and it is not fully into adulthood that you can see 3 to 5 weeks into the future. Now, if you don't believe me, let me give you an example. Let's say someone called you up and said, do you mind hosting Christmas at your house this year for the family? You'd be like, love to. All over it, fabulous. Now, is Christmas outside our 5-week window as adults? Yeah. So what you do is you're like, you have an image of Christmas, which is like this blurry image of like, everyone hanging in a pretty Christmas tree and whatever. Like, it's not really a crystal image. As we move towards Thanksgiving, you might suddenly be like, ooh, let me email the family and see who's coming. 27 people are coming. And now you're starting to visualize the table. Where are we going to fit 27 people for dinner? Who's going to stay the night? How are we going to handle the presents? And then you go, why did I offer to do that? But do you see what I mean? You sort of start to pull it in. All right, so this is kind of a joke, but not really. And let me just make one more comment. If you have a totally neurotypical brain, you've got nothing going on, all right? Your frontal lobes, which house this executive function skill, are the very last part of the brain to mature. And if you're on a totally normal neurotypical trajectory, that part of the brain is not fully developed until 23 to 26 years of age, which is why your mom and dad didn't like you until you came home from college. But it's also probably why you have met young adults who don't really come into themselves until 24, 25. All right, but this is a joke, but not really. But I'd like everyone to participate in my live audience here. By show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of a diagnosis called ADHD? Okay, great, yeah. Now, I know it's kind of a joke, but not really. But the fact of the matter is, there's a big push to change the diagnosis of ADHD to EFDD, Executive Function Developmental Delay. We absolutely know students with ADHD demonstrate a 30 to 35%, which translates to 3 and a 3.5 year delay in this specific skill. So let me give you a really good example of what this looks like. Let's say that you are a first grade teacher and you have a student who, we'll give them a chronological age of 7. That might be a little old for first grade, but we'll call it 7. If that child, and again, at first grade, you're expecting that kid to be able to do a little math, little reading, and have a snack. But if that child has ADHD, then their executive function age is 3.5, which means that student is focusing at best 5 to 20 minutes, and that's why they're really struggling with that a little bit. Now, that's part of it. Let me give you another example. I have a lot of students that are 18, and they did it. They got themselves into college, and off they go. And on day 1 of college, what does the professor give you? Syllabus, you bet. And the syllabus outlines what you're going to do over the course of weeks. We're going to have these readings, those modules, little paper due, those readings, those modules, midterm, those readings, those modules, big paper, those readings, those modules, final. And your entire grade is based on 4 things. And you have to be, keeping up with all of those readings and all of that work in order to be prepared for that midterm, etc. But if I'm 18 and my executive function age is more like 14.5, then really the farthest I can plan out is 2 to 3 days. So those kids go off to college and they did it and they blow things off, and then all of a sudden something 2 days before it's due, they have multiple weeks worth of work to do. And the problem is, this is the biggest shift between high school and college. In high school, you have a lot of things that are due every couple days. Little calculus worksheet, little math paper, a little Spanish this, and your entire grade might be based on 24 small assignments. And then you get to college and your whole grade is based on 4 things. And I have a lot of kids that have to take a medical leave from college, not because they're not intellectually capable, organizationally they fall flat. Do you all, my high school teachers, do you see the difference when I'm talking about? Like, they've got to be able to manage planning out work over greater distances of time in order to be prepared for college. And so that's a big thing that we have to talk about today, is how do we close that gap? So the thing about it is this skill of being a mind mime and planning over time, you do this all day long as a student in school. Your school, by nature, you're practicing that. What am I going to look like when I enter school for my morning routine? When I'm at the rug, what am I going to look like when I get to my desk? When I'm at my desk, what am I going to look like lining up to go to music class? What am I going to look like taking that homework home tonight? What is that project going to look like? What am I going to look like prepared for that exam? Do you see how you do that? All day long we're doing that. Now, I don't know if I'm going to articulate this well. Maybe I won't, but I hope I will. When we hit the pandemic, right, even if kids were in the classroom, we were exercising for our students physical and social distancing, which meant we were no longer saying to kids, time for math, go get your fraction circles and a whiteboard and go back to your desk. We didn't want students sharing materials, so what did we do? We brought the materials to them. They didn't have to transition in the classroom. We no longer had them line up and walk down the hall to music. The music teacher came into the classroom. They ate lunch in the classroom. And our high school students, even if it was hybrid learning, they were just multi-tabbing. I mean, they didn't even have to get up and transition between classes. I'm finding a lot of our high schoolers having now to get up and do a morning routine and get to school. Some of them actually miss the online learning. But here's the thing about it, because of the pandemic, they weren't practicing the very skill that you need to have for strong executive function skills, which is why we're seeing such an elevation in executive function impairments in our classrooms. And the other thing about it is, this is a fascinating infographic. I did a lecture with Jessica Minahan on anxiety, and this is something that she presented on. Think about this for a minute. If you are a second grade teacher, the last normal school year that your kids had was never. They never really had an in-class school experience. If you are a 9th grade teacher, the last normal school year that your kids had was grade 6. So it's like the equivalent of, think about, we talk about that transition to middle school, and they're going to be a 6th grader. Well, it's like you're a 9th grade teacher with an emerging middle school student in your classroom. Are you guys seeing and feeling this in your classrooms? Yeah, I mean, it's like such a big age gap that we have to address. We're really worried about it. So the thing about it then is this. When we talk about executive function skills, oh, I know why. I did something for 1 minute. I changed something up in my own PowerPoint and I forgot it, and it was throwing me off. Let me put the whole thing together for you and show you just broadly then what a good executive function is. So remember, good executive function is your ability to mime it, to see the future. So it's your ability to say, okay, let me make an image. What will that thing look like when I'm done? And you have to access that nonverbal working memory. With that in mind, you have to ask yourself, okay, well, if that's what it's going to look like, then what do I need to do to carry that out? And that's where you're going to imagine that movement. How am I moving to achieve that goal? And what materials will I need to get ready? And with that image in mind, that's what allows you to start talking yourself through it. We teach students and teachers all the time that we plan backwards to execute forwards. Let me give you a really good example of that, all right? Here's a girl, it's 9 o'clock at night, she has a blank poster board, and she's imagining, what will it look like when I'm done? Well, I've made this poster. It has 2 examples of shelter and clothing for my Arctic region, and she's very aware. It's 9 o'clock now, and I really want this done in a half hour. And with that image in mind, she talks herself through it. Got a big lacrosse game tomorrow. I really want this done in a half hour. I'm going to go ahead and find and print and lay out the pictures, and then I'll glue them. Ooh. And notice her flexible thinking. Plan A, I'm going to see if mom can't help me print that cool background, but if mom's not home to help me, no problem. Plan B, I'll just color the background gray and put some mountain pictures. She's able to flexibly imagine a plan A and a plan B. A lot of my students, they come up with a plan A, and even if it's not going their way, they stay stuck and they stick to that method, even if it's not working out for them. So then what happens is, once we've made our plan, then we execute the plan. So that's when we move towards that. So watch this, and this is what I love about this slide. Now this girl executes her plan. She starts finding her pictures, printing her pictures. But notice it's now 10:05 at night. She has an igloo, she has a caribou, and the title. Does her actual match her plan? Not at all. But here's why it matters. At least now at this point, she knows she needs help. She knows that why does it not match my plan? Is it that I've been on my phone and I'm distracted? Is it that I've been playing with the dog? Is it that I'm just having a really hard time finding pictures? Is it that, dang it, we had no ink for the inkjet printer, I hadn't planned on that? But the reason why it matters is this. If you have a student who never imagined a plan A and never imagined a plan B, and they just dive on in and they get started, and you come up to them at 10:05, whether you're a parent or whether you're a resource room teacher, and you say, this is due at 11, right? Or you've got to get that done. Do you need any help? This is where the kid's like, I'm fine. Well, you're not fine. You need to get in bed, or this is really due. What's happening with the pictures? I'm on it. Well, let me see. I'm happy to provide support. No, it's good. This is where the battle ensues because the student doesn't even know they're in trouble. I mean, they haven't really been able to even regulate towards a goal to know, well, why do I need help and how do I get back on track? So one thing that makes me, well, and I'm just going to jump to this. Don't worry about this slide for 1 minute. Here's the thing then, executive function has 3 key stages. Backwards task planning, where we plan, organize, and prioritize the steps of a task so that when we're in the appropriate space and place, we initiate while inhibiting distractions and work towards that task. And that's what allows us to self-monitor and compare plan versus actual. But remember, the only thing that underlies this whole thing is the passage of time. You constantly have to be aware of what time is it now, by what time do I need that done by, how much time and what pace do I need to keep to get that done. So with all of that in mind, that's the big idea about executive function skills. In your handout, your electronic handout, I gave you a ton of resources on ages and stages. I definitely encourage you to check that out. For example, one of the things that I gave you is an executive function skills checklist. You can go all the way through that and determine what a child's executive function age, like what skill are they doing securely, and compare it to their chronological age. I definitely encourage you in your handout to check that out. It'll give you a really good idea of at what level your student is functioning at. All right, so with all of that in mind, a lot of our students feel like that about academics. We don't want that. And I just want to make a quick mention that anxiety is absolutely on the rise. How many of you see a huge increase in anxiety in your classrooms? Almost all hands are going up. When I recently presented with Jessica on anxiety, her statistic was that 39% of students in American education are presenting with anxiety. That's really scary. It's too bad. But here's the takeaway. When you're having all or nothing thinking, or you're ruminating, or you're worrying about something, that emotional center of your brain like hijacks your frontal lobe, and it makes it very hard for you to get to your mind mime. You can't even get to that planning because you're worrying. So the problem is our kids with anxiety, they're not getting that forethought, or it's kind of like blurry at best. So what we know about anxiety is that as anxiety goes up, working memory goes right on down. And when it goes down, for some of our students, it even completely just disappears. They just are so in the moment of worry that they can't even do any of that planning piece. So when we have our students that are highly anxious, even if they're anxious over academic assignments, a big thing that we want to work on is helping them access what it's going to look like to reduce that stress and plan towards that. So one of the things that I decided to do today, in terms of intervention, I'm going to just bring everybody on the same page about our approach towards intervention. I love the work of Dr. Russell Barkley. He's really sort of considered the father of executive function research. And he will tell you that if we as educators and as parents are not going to compensate for kids' executive function skills. In other words, we're not going to give them a checklist. We're not going to check off that they did their homework. We're not going to check in, did you turn in your homework? We're not going to cue and prompt them through everything. The only way we're going to make kids independent and neurologically grow their executive function skills is if we teach students to repeatedly practice stopping, seeing the future, feeling the future, saying the future, going towards the future, and playing with the future. Plan A, Plan B. So that is our goal today, is how do we help you help students be a mind mime? How do we help them to rehearse and plan back from that future? So one of the things that I want to do is, in your handout today, we're definitely going to be teaching kids how to mime it. In talking with Sarah Cannon, who invited me here today, it was our understanding that a large number of you had attended and heard me speak before. So if you are following along on the electronic handout I shared, I made a presenter executive decision to present with you a little bit more of like advanced level 2 executive function strategies today, rather than to kind of do the repeat of some of the basics, hoping that so many of you have heard me before. So for that reason, if you are following along, I'm going to jump a portion of my presentation, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump way ahead, and we're going to start with some time management strategies at an advanced level. Then we're going to go, how do we help our students with complex academic assignments, especially if we're in a resource room model. Then we're going to talk all about written expression, and regardless of what writing curriculum you're using, and long-term projects. We felt like that would be a better use than some of the more basic strategies. So if everybody's cool with that, not like you don't have a choice, but that's what it is. All right, so what we're going to do is, we know that we want students to be visualizing what something is going to look like, but they have to do that over time. So what I'm going to start with for the moment is, how do we help our students develop a sense of the passage of time? Now, one part of this will be a quick repeat, just very quick, if you heard me before, with a deeper dive part 2. So number one goal is we really want to make time visible for our students, because we know executive function is all about that rehearsal of what something will look like. So I love this example. It says, but I spent 5 hours working on my report, 1 hour to go to the mall for an ink cartridge, 2 hours on hold with tech support, 45 minutes looking for a sheet of white paper, and 30 minutes searching for the perfect font. Not really. Okay, so that's problematic. So the thing about it is, I love this example. It says you have 10:05, you have until 10:30 to work on your science lab. Make sure to write your hypothesis, the list of materials, and the methodology, and we will come back together as a group at 20 of to discuss, okay? Great. Not so great. Because here's the assignment. That student, first of all, that was all verbal, which means it went in one ear and likely out the other ear. When are we starting? By when do I need to have that done by? But the other thing is, that student, I can guarantee you, at least these are what my students do, they sit down to write their hypothesis and they're like, oh, that paper's in my locker, can I go to my locker? And they go to their locker, and then they come back, turns out it was actually in their notebook the whole time. So then they find it, and then they type that up, and then they realize that their lab partner has their materials, so they text their lab partner. And then they go to the bathroom, and then they come back and they check their fantasy football stats. And then they sit down, and their lab partner finally texts them back, and they write up the materials, and then they start to doodle something, and then you say, okay, it's time to go. And this kid is like, what? You didn't give us time to work on it. And they're all upset that they have to take it home. Do you know the kid I'm talking about? They're not efficiently using, even if it's in a resource room, they're not efficiently using that time to get that assignment done. So our favorite strategy is, we love to use a technique called the working clock. And we recommend that every resource room, classroom, whatever it is, has 2 clocks. One clock is the clock that hangs on the wall, like you see right there. But every classroom should have a separate clock, and or I'll give you a digital version that does not hang on the wall. And we call it the working clock. Now, we call it the working clock not because it has a battery and it's working, but because it goes wherever a student is doing work. If a student's at a resource room table, that's where the working clock goes. If their desk at home, that's where the working clock goes. Whole class instruction, this is going to go in front of the classroom. You have a group doing a reading center, that's where the working clock goes. Ideally, your working clock, it is always an analog clock. Hopefully it has a glass face. The reason why is that you can use a dry erase marker and you can show the actual sweep and volume of time. So I can now say to the class, it's 10:05. We have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes to work on our lab reports. And I can shade in the clock exactly how time will fill up. Sorry, my dry erase marker is a little bit on the light side. But not only can I help them see that volume of time, we can also plan the time. I can show them we have 5 minutes, really, because all we're doing is copying down our hypothesis. We already talked about it. There are not that many materials, so you might need only 5 minutes to write materials, and that'll give you a good 10 to 15 minutes to list out the methods. Now, the reason why we love this is I've just made time visible in the classroom. Remember, it is a clock that's working, which means even though I've written on the clock, as time passes, time is going to begin to pass. So that student goes to their locker to get their hypothesis, and then they come back. They check their fantasy football stats, they text their friend. They wait for their friend, they go to the bathroom. They come back from the bathroom, and they write up the hypothesis, then they doodle a little bit, and you say, okay, 5-minute warning. Well, the beauty of it is, at least this student now has the ability to look back, and again, if you look at this slide here, they can see, well, how did I utilize my time? What did that look like? And our favorite phrase is, do you have any time robbers? And we love the phrase time robbers because it gets kids to really understand what are the things that get in my way and keep me from being productive. So it makes time visible for students, and it's a real game changer. Now, if you're in a classroom and you're doing whole class instruction, I love the large online clock on this website. I don't recommend the stopwatches on this website. What it does is it produces a live active clock. Now, you're all wishing it were 20 to 4, but that's actually in Massachusetts time, which is where I'm from. So that's why it is correct. It's almost 20 to 4 in Massachusetts. When you have this website, if you go in the upper right-hand corner, you can click something called Super Full Screen. Pardon me for just 1 minute because I need to open something on my computer that I forgot to open for 1 minute. There it goes. Okay, so if you click Super Full Screen, this is what it will do. You can actually, if you're like in a classroom like this and you're projecting to a screen in the classroom or projecting to your whiteboard, you can project an actual clock like that. Now, one of the things that's really cool about this is, and let me just grab something on my computer. Okay, there it is. It did what I wanted it to do now. Let me go back to full screen. If you are not projecting your clock on a whiteboard, let's say you're projecting it on a screen like this in your classroom, there is an amazing little screen marker. It's not a Chrome extension. It's a free download called Epic Pen. This is what Epic Pen is. It's like a little tool. And I love this tool because it's a screen marker. It allows you to, mark on top of any screen just using your mouse. So I can, for example, choose my, go back to here, I can choose my pen thickness, I can choose any color. So I can actually say to my students, okay, we are going to go ahead and we're going to take 5 minutes to gather our creative writing packets. I can change my ink color. We're going to work on our creative writing for 15 minutes. I can fill that in, and then we will come back together as a group and we will take 10 minutes to share our ideas with the class. And not only can you mark on the clock, but you can actually type on the clock or type on any screen you want. So we can say something like students need to, I'm trying to type and talk at the same time, gather your packet. Then what you're going to do, and you can change the text size of that, no problem. You just move it down to that. And then we're going to, let's say, write the setting of the story, and then we're going to share ideas with the class. Sorry about that, I'm trying to type and talk. But what I love about it, and what you can notice here, is that as time is passing, do you see where the minute hand is moving through that get ready time? Students can now see, oh, okay, that's how much time I have left to get ready. Now, let me show you what this is going to look like in a classroom. It's really pretty super cool. This is what it looks like in the classroom. Let me go back to where I was. By the way, I did put this in your handout, Epic Pen. If you don't want to use Epic Pen, WebPaint Chrome extension is also a good one that allows you to mark on top of a screen. But instead of having that on your smart board, instead you can project something like that, so that students now know, oh, okay, we've got like 20 minutes to get the paragraph summary done, and then that would give us 10 minutes to get our worksheet filled out. It is such a game changer because as kids are working, they're regulating themselves against time. And again, it's the difference between that and that. Do you see the difference? All of a sudden, students really know, well, when is that time period of work starting? When is it ending? What do I need to want and have accomplished during that? So for that reason, we love, love, love making time visible directly in the classroom. But that's kind of a part one. Now, part two of time management is this. I could be wrong, but I don't think a single one of you got up this morning and said, I'm going to shower until the hot water runs out. If you did, good for you. I'm impressed. But instead, I bet this is what a lot of you did, and I'm going to turn my back to you for a minute, is you got up and in your mind's eye, you're showering and you're thinking, okay, I need to be out of the shower by 20 after so that I can be dressed by 7:30, so that I can finish eating breakfast by 7:40, and I'll be out the door by 7:50. You imagine how you're going to move through space and time to be on time. Those are called time markers. We visualize where we want to be in a moment in time. So with that in mind, one of the things that we found, my coworker Chris and I, was we said, okay, if we know people think in time markers, then we have to teach our students how to think in time markers too. So one of the things that we did is we developed something called the Time Tracker Program. Now, with our Time Tracker Program, let me just go back to this because it's doing something a little bit temperamental. Oh, for some reason I lost my clicker for a second. We developed the Time Tracker Program where we use magnets on a clock. Now, when we use magnets on a clock, what we do is we actually show for our students how they are going to spend their time. Now, the point behind this is you don't necessarily have to use our magnets. It's not about that. I mean, you can get, I'm going to give you multiple options for this. You can get magnets at like a Walgreens, a CVS, a Target, whatever it is. But one of the things that we find is really helpful is if I have a student, for example, who's reading a chapter in a textbook and has to answer those questions, if I want them to regulate their time, I can identify how much time they're going to work on that. Okay, we're going to dedicate a half hour to reading and answering comprehension questions. And I can show my half hour of time. But again, I want that student to visualize time markers. So they're going to start reading, and I can even have them pre-experience the sweep of time by sweeping the magnet. I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes to read, and we love to create what's called a midpoint check-in. So I can slide this and identify that midpoint. Whatever you do, please do not use the word halfway. We have a lot of students that are slow processors, that are anxious kids, that won't be half done. So a midpoint in time is a little bit different. It's like we want to be able to check in at the midpoint, and in addition, we not only have students mark their midpoint in time, but we also want students to create what's called a corresponding space marker. Well, where is my midpoint goal on my work? Well, this is the range of where I want to be. We love to use that word midpoint range. If you are going to, in your classrooms, set a timer for an auditory alert, in this example, I would never set a timer for a half hour. Instead, I would set my timer for 15 minutes, because at that midpoint check-in, I want students to be able to check in and say, how am I doing? Am I still focused on the goal? Where am I at? Because as time is passing, I want to be able to see what goal am I working towards. Now, it can look like that, or alternatively, you can use Post-it notes on a clock. That's easy. We're going to gather our materials. Our done goal is to reach question 10 or 11, which means at my midpoint check-in, I want to be around question 4 to 5. If your students are doing their work, I love to have students actually put like a sticky note that that's where my midpoint goal is. And that's a great thing that you can do in your resource room, even if you have students working on multiple things. So I can say to a classroom, we have a half hour in resource room. Every student's going to have a different goal. Your done goal might be your calculus worksheet. Your done goal might be your, history workbook, whatever it is. And then I ask the students to identify their midpoint check-in. Your midpoint might be between problem 5 and 7. Your midpoint might be that you've taken 3 bullet point notes. So it's a great way to get kids to sort of see their time and plan what they want to accomplish within that moment in time, and then be able to check in with that. So again, if you're in a high school classroom or a middle school classroom where kids are going to be making these awards for World War, that they might say, okay, my done goal is that I've written in all the detailed content, which means by the midpoint, I should at least have the title and a few visuals. So to get ready, I'm going to be gathering my colored pencils and my research links. That way the student is sort of planning, in order for me to get this little award done, those are going to have to be my checkpoints. It really helps students plan in time what their done goal is. So to give you another example of this, I'm bummed that my clicker is being annoying for a minute. Give me just one hot second to do something here, because it is bugging me. I lost my clicker for a second, and I'm not sure why. There we go. Let me go back to here for 1 second. Now it should work. Okay, great. I'm back on track. Sorry about that. Even this is a great example that if students are doing, oops, 1 second. There it goes. You can mark on a clock, okay, my done goal is to have 4 articles shared in Google Drive, which means at the midpoint, I really need to have 2 articles done. So the thing about it is this. Again, if you're setting an alert, we want to check in at the midpoint. Now, when I check in with the midpoint, I always ask students, are you still focused on the goal, or has your attention shifted? Do you have any time robbers? And in my experience, the kids really like that phrase, time robbers. They understand what a time robber is. It's what are the things that are stealing my time. But even more important than time robbers is kids being able to identify what are their time savers. What are the things that I can do that will get me back on track? In your large electronic handout, I gave you an image of this. But one of my other favorite things to do is sometimes in a resource room at that midpoint time, or when I'm working with a student, I love for them to check in and say, how are you doing? So in this example, am I still focused on the goal? Yes, I am. Is the work easy, medium, or hard? Well, actually, it's a lot harder than I thought. Do I need any help? There's that self-advocacy. Yes, I do. Do you need help from a who or a what? Well, I think I'm going to go for a what. I know the teacher gave us that little lesson on Khan Academy. Maybe I should watch that. And do I have any distractions? Internal, like things in your body, external, things outside your body, or digital? Yes, I have a digital distraction. What is it? It's my phone. Okay, well, what would be a time saver? Well, I'm going to try the Forest app for a 10-minute period of time. Now I'll show you the Forest app in a minute, or maybe I'll put my phone on airplane mode. But what you're doing is you're getting the student to own, how am I going to manage my time robbers and get back on track. Now, one of my other favorite things to do is we have time robber and time saver Post-it notes. Now, again, it's not about our Post-it notes. You don't have to necessarily use ours. You could even just use a Post-it note. Let me show you what this looks like. These are what our, hold on one second. Let me move these back here until I need them. There we go. These are what our time robber time Post-its look like. They just have a little time robber. Again, it's not about ours, but what I do love to do is I love to have students in an executive function notebook, and we create a lot of executive function notebooks for students. I'll be showing you more about this in a moment. But just like kids have a notebook for math or science or Spanish, I do believe kids should have a notebook for their executive function skills where they're collating the things that they use to help them regulate their executive function. And one of the things that I love to have is a time robber, time saver page. So if I'm working with a student and let's say I'm in the resource room and they're working away, I actually love to be the one walking around with a pad of Post-it notes. And I might say to that student, boy, you know what? I notice one of your time robbers is being antsy. And what I can do is I can write antsy on here and I can just put it on their time robber page in their notebook. As we go through, then I ask the student, well, what would be a time saver? And they might say, well, I should have my fidget tool. All right, you are looking really tired today. What's a time saver? Drink water. Now, what I might do, my PowerPoint isn't animated it this way. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just write the time robbers down as I observe them. And then, let's say like the next day in resource room when we're teaching executive function skills, I will have the students go through each time robber and identify what would be a time saver. If I'm really tired, my time saver might be doing run up and down the stairs, chewing on ice, getting a glass of water. I'm feeling really antsy, my time robbers might be using a fidget tool, or my time robber might be having music in my ears. Then what I do is the following, right? The next time that a student has an assignment, we get the assignment planned. Before they do their assignment, I say, let's go to your time robber page. And we're going to open up that time robber page, and I'm going to say, before you even start, what are your potential time robbers? Now, this is a girl that I was working with. I grant you we were doing a telepractice session. She had to do this Diamante poem, and she said her time robbers were Roblox, her time robbers were kittens, and her friend Jordan. Those were all the things that were really distracting her. And I said, okay, well, what would be your time savers? So we actually identified when she could do Roblox after school. We reminded her about the plan for the kittens when she got home. And she was reminded that she was already going to be doing a play date. So every time she thought about Jordan, she needed to just remember that she was going to see Jordan after school. And sometimes it's enough to say, I can think about that later. So again, I love for students to create those time and space markers. So if I have a student who's doing a worksheet like this and they're going to spend that 20 minutes, I will have them mark their midpoint. This is where I want to be at the midpoint. And then I'm going to have them identify their time robbers. Well, I know one of my time robbers is being tired. So if this is in their notebook, this is what I'll do. I will say to a student, are you tired today? Yeah, I am a little bit. All right, let's go get your ice. Is the noise bothering you? No, that one's not too bad. Are you hungry? I'm definitely hungry. Okay, let's go get a snack before you even start your work. Because we're teaching the student to manage those time robbers before. Because as adults, let me give you an example. How many of you, before you work, sit down at your desk, go to the bathroom, get a cup of coffee, and clear off your desk a little bit? You do that because you're getting rid of your time robbers so that you can focus. So it's a great way to sort of prospectively help students manage that. Now, I also want to share with you a couple of other really cool tools. So we have a brand new Chrome extension called the Thinking Time Tracker Chrome extension. And let me show you what this looks like. It's pretty cool. If you have heard me before, we have actually updated our Chromebook extension, so you may want to update it because we got feedback from a lot of people. So the thing is, we have a lot of students that are doing online work, even in like a classroom. If you're projecting up on your computer online, you may want to make time visible in class as well. So our Chrome extension looks like this. It allows you to set the time that students are going to say, gather materials. Let's say in this classroom, students are going to work for 35 minutes, and then they have 10 minutes to sort of pack up everything and transition and get to the next class. Not only can you create the time, but you can also create time markers. So if that's what you don't have to, but you can say students need to, like, for example, I already pre-typed this, gather their research packet. They're going to start their research at the midpoint goal. They should have found 1 article. Our done goal, about 2 articles. And to get done, we're going to submit in Google Classroom. So once we're back and we hit start, what happens is that clock appears on the web page. Now you can move this clock wherever it's convenient for you on the web page, but we also have this little button that says hide. So we can often show students what the time plan is, hide it, we can work through the web page that we want, right? So I can come back, I can talk about the primary sources. At the end of that, we can check in and see how are we doing in our time. But anytime you shift web pages, so for example, if I shift over to this web page, same thing, that clock will appear or I can hide it. So anytime you go to a brand new web page, let's say, I don't know, I'm just picking this, I'll go somewhere random, same thing. It will show me that, and it will make auditory alerts like you hear there to remind you where you need to be. So it's a great way as students go online and as you're teaching online to keep track of time. So I encourage you to check that out. That's our Chrome extension. I had a student who was working with this on Kami where they're planning their time, and that's where you want to be. But you can see as time passes, the color just becomes more translucent, so now they know they have about 10 minutes of time left. So the other thing is, we have also, if you use Mac, like iPad or your iPhone, we have an iOS app that's the same thing. And one thing I really love, I have a lot of teachers that will project this in class and do it with group work or students doing individual work, where the teacher in the resource room might say, at 9 o'clock will be our midpoint check-in. Group A, what is your midpoint goal? And this group said, well, we wanted to have found an article on Arctic survival. This group said that they wanted to have completed their research, and this group said that they wanted to have filled out their organizer. So it's just a great way that when you get to a midpoint, it's amazing. All of a sudden, kids are more independent in the classroom. So I definitely encourage you to sort of check out some of those apps. Now, one of the things that I mentioned too about space markers, a really amazing thing is also have kids mark their space of where they're going to be. So I'm going to start reading on page 69. My done goal is to reach page, say, 89, and at my midpoint, I want to be on page 79. That's great because as time passes, it makes the work look less, and kids can just check in and say, okay, here's my midpoint goal, doesn't match where I want to be in the midpoint. And I mentioned earlier managing time robbers and time savers, especially if you work with middle and high school students. My absolute favorite time saver app is the Forest app. How many of you know Forest? Seriously? Oh my goodness, okay, sorry, I thought a lot of you would know this. I'm thrilled then. Let me show you what the Forest app is. I love to teach this to students, and I have a lot of my students use it. So the problem for a lot of our students is as students are doing work, a lot of our kids are like, ooh, I'm just going to check out my scores on ESPN. And they just jump to ESPN, and then they go back to their work, and then they might just go on Pinterest for a hot second. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's a lot of this like bouncing back and forth. So one of my favorite things is something called the Forest app. Now, I like the Forest app because students can use it on their phone, they can use it on the computer, and you can use it on the computer. So the way that it works is the Forest app is also a Chrome extension. They all sync. And the way that it works is you have the student identify an amount of time that they're going to work. I really encourage my students, and this is great if kids are working on their Chrome or their MacBook, whatever it is, in the resource room. I like to tell kids to usually set like a 10-minute focus period to a 20-minute focus period. I don't have them do more than that. So let's say I set this for 10 minutes. Then what I do is I click the little tree. Everyone see the tree? I click it, and now it becomes a seedling, and I go to do my work. So I'm doing my research. I'm reading all about, the course of the empire takes its way. I'm doing all my research, and then I'm like, I'm just going to check ESPN for a hot second. So I go over to ESPN, and it says, nope, your tree is still growing. And I can't do it. So I'm like, all right, fine. I go back to my research, and then I'm like, I'm just going to check Pinterest for a hot second. So I go over to Pinterest. Nope, it's a no-go. Can't go to Pinterest. So I go back and I do my research, whatever it is. I go back to my, my Google Doc, whatever it is, and then I go back to Pinterest. Now, if I decide to give up and say, forget it, I really want to look at Pinterest, it says, are you sure you want to give up? You will kill your cute little tree. And I'm like, yep, I want to kill the tree. Your tree is dead. And now it will let me access the website. But if I did not do that, then what happens is it actually grows a nice fluffy tree, and it takes that tree and it puts it on a plot of land, and the more focused time you have, you grow a forest, hence why it's called the Forest app. It kind of gamifies focusing. I can't tell you how many kids will even come into me and be like, check out my forest. And they're just really proud of it, and actually the company in and of itself will plant trees for you if you have so many focus periods of time, which I think is really pretty cool. So the other thing that I just want to make a mention of, and I had to throw this in as a random thing, but I have a lot of kids that when they're reading, they do not know the meaning of a word. And I have a lot of kids that ends up being a time robber for them, because they either don't read effectively because they're not going to take the time to look up the word, or when they take up the time to look up a word, they feel like it's such a time suck that they end up giving up on the assignment. So if you don't know this, there's an amazing extension called Google Dictionary Chrome extension. This is what it looks like, and here is what is really, really amazing about it. So if I go back to this one here, and let's say I'm reading along and I don't really know, for example, I don't know, I'll just pick up something random. Let's say I don't really remember what that word, I don't know what a prologue means. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a good word. All you do is you double click it and it gives you the dictionary definition right there. That's what the Chrome extension does. It's amazing. So if I get down here and I don't know what a mural is, painting the mural, what's a mural? I just double click it, it gives you the definition right there. That is an amazing time saver for a lot of our kids. And by the way, if you also don't know this, and I'm sure a lot of you do, but I guess I'll just take a minute and show it to you anyway. I think one of the biggest problems is let me just do this for 1 minute. We'll just do something like this for a second. The biggest problem about a lot of websites that kids are working on is they all have targeted advertising. Now, I suppose I'm going to be embarrassed in just a minute because it's going to show you the things that I've been searching for. But you know what I mean? Like, they'll have all the targeted advertising. Oh, well, actually, I'm using an ad blocker on this website, which if you notice up here, it says it's blocking 54 ads. Now, if I take that off of this website for a minute, let me just take it off for a second, and refresh for a minute, it will put all of those advertisements on there, which is a huge distraction for kids because they want to like click it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Now, of course, I'm trying to demonstrate this and all the distractions won't come up. Oh, there it is, right? So here's going to come up all of these videos, all the advertisements are going to come up, right? Like, oh, okay, searching for a new computer, here's all those things. So if you don't know Mercury Reader, how many of you use Mercury Reader? You don't like Mercury Reader?
It's not allowed in the district.
Oh, it's not allowed in the district. If Mercury Reader is not allowed in the district, you can use reader mode. Hold on, CNN's playing. 1 second. See, I got to get this off. There it is. If it's not allowed in the district, if you just use Reader View, when you click Reader View in any browser, what's really awesome about Reader View is it removes all of the advertising and it only gives you the article in and of itself. And that's great for a lot of kids who are prone to all that distraction of looking around. So definitely check out Reader Mode. Reader Mode is in every browser, whether you're using Firefox or Chrome, whatever it is. So definitely worth checking that one out. So the thing that I want to just sort of shift to next is actually one that I think we very rarely teach in schools, which is really important for a lot of our students with impaired executive function skills. And here's one of the things that I'm talking about. What I find happens all the time is when we give kids schedules, we tend to give schedules that look like this. Now, whether this is like an academic support, or like a hybrid, like working block, work block 2, or whether we have kids who use an agenda book like this where they record their homework. The problem with an agenda book like this or a schedule like that, this is actually a to-do list. This is not scheduling because all I'm doing is recording my homework in this. And even if I give a kid a sticky and say you have your tutor at 2:30, soccer at 6, that still does not give a student a visual of what their day is going to look like. And I have a lot of parents and even a lot of resource room teachers where we help kids map out their day like this. Now, you're not going to like this, but it's a no. And here's the reason why it's a no. The problem with that is that written schedule is actually just a verbal list of how you're spending your time. It's not actually a mental rehearsal of what time will look like. So for that reason, let me give you a couple of strategies. If I were to take this right here and I were to convert it onto a 15-minute increment schedule, this is what this looks like. Now, there's something a little bit unfortunate on the way the projector is showing. Some of my colors are a little muted. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but that's actually filled in like a light purple color and that's like a light orange color. Can you guys kind of make the goodness of fit? At least from my view, it's not showing up very well on the projector. It's probably better on your handout. But if I take this schedule here, this is what it looks like. I have this work block. Then what happens is I have this morning break, a work block. I have an hour and 15 minutes for lunch, hour and a half work block, and then there's that last block of the day. Now, the thing about this is the following. A lot of times I can say to students, okay, you have a soccer game at 3:30, so I could put soccer right here, and we could say with the student, you have your tutor at 6. Now, the problem with that is a lot of kids will be like, awesome, it's a pretty good night. So they're like, sweet, I don't have that much going on. That is not a visual of the day. What we find we have to teach students is that they have to be able to visualize blocks of time. Because actually, if it's a soccer game and the soccer game starts at 3:30 And it usually goes an hour and a half to at least 5 o'clock, and it could even go into overtime. This is what we call planning for the extras, like a maybe. So I can assume that my soccer game might go till at least 5:15. But that's not the other thing. I also need to be able to get to the locker room, get dressed, walk out to the field, and have warm-up, which means I have to be at the locker room at least by 3 o'clock to be out at the field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off that time. From 3 to 3:30, I am changing, getting out to the field, the whole thing. As soon as the soccer game is over, I've got to go back to the locker room and change my clothes. Then it's at least another 15-minute drive home. As soon as I get home, guaranteed I'm going to need to have a little bit of dinner, may or may not throw myself in the shower, and then I have my tutor. So this time here, I'm still transitioning. My tutor lasts an hour. As soon as my tutor is done, guaranteed I'm going to need to shift gears a little bit, go to the bathroom, get another little snack, and maybe the Broncos are on at 8:30, and I really want to watch the Broncos for a little bit before I go to bed. All of a sudden, the student realistically sees this is what their day looks like. And the advantage of that is this. I have a lot of kids that in your free block resource room times would be like, oh, I don't need to work on that. I have plenty of time tonight. But when they actually see how time will fill up, they really realize, ooh, I don't have that much time. I guess I should study for that quiz here. I guess I really should finish that history up there. They suddenly learn how to fill in those blocks of time, and they are realistic about time. So I love to do that. Now, a cool trick that you can do, one of the things that we really like to do is at the start of, say, like a resource room time, we love to use Google Forms. We did a lot of this in the pandemic, and then we just carried it over. That every time a student came into resource room, we had them do like a check-in. Now, the check-in can look a little bit like this, where you're just kind of looking and saying, okay, you know, do you need any support from me? What's one thing you're proud of that you did this week, etc. You can have things like that. But the other thing that we did is we did this one here. Let me just escape out of that for 1 minute and go back to this one. We still did the same thing with a check-in where we would have kids check in and we wanted a chance to know how are they emotionally doing, where some kids might not tell us that in person. This was a good way to kind of get a feel for it. We would love to have kind of like a fun question, what's your superpower? But then what we did is we would say anything confusing or tricky from yesterday, and then we love to put a schedule in and say to the student, what is your plan for tonight? Now, even if we're not writing it on this, we at least wanted students to be visualizing what do you have going on tonight and understand when do you see yourself doing your work. So we wanted students to be able to visualize, well, I have a tutor at 6, there's a show I wanted to watch at 7, so my work block, I'm planning to work from 7:30 to 8. Just having them visualize, just having them rehearse when they were going to do something. When will you do the work? Where are you going to do it? And even setting an action trigger. How are you going to remind yourself? Where is that going to be? Are you going to set an alert in Google Calendar? Are you going to set an alert on your phone? So that kids were sort of getting triggered to when they were going to do that. And then also even being able to say, like, what tool and strategy am I going to use? So that's a great way. Now, there's another way too that we love to do this. That's just the same thing in your handout. And I'm going to show you another example of this in about 15 minutes with something else. But if you are in a younger classroom where you're advising, the fact of the matter is, the majority of kids, the schedules that they're exposed to are these. You know, that's what we tend to put on the board as an agenda, 10 to 10:20, 10:20 to 12 o'clock. And a lot of our kids who can't handle agenda changes, that will totally throw them off. So one of my favorite things to do is I recommend in the younger grades that teachers have a background with those 15-minute increments, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. Then you can cut out the classes, the volume of time that they are, so that students can see morning meeting as just a little 15-minute period of time. And it's great for kids who can't handle schedule changes. Because if, let's say, we have a guest speaker in science today, but they're coming in the morning, I can take science and move it up here to Writer's Workshop and move Writer's Workshop down, and now they can visually see how it's going to fit in. If you have kids who never pay attention to the schedule, then a cool trick is grab your phone or iPad and you take a photograph of the schedule, print it out, and I love to give kids, even in the younger grades, a printout of what that schedule will look like. That way, as soon as math is over, the student can highlight it, and now they're looking ahead to say, ooh, I have morning meeting. Then they can highlight it. They can look ahead and say, oh, okay, I know I have Reader's Workshop. I'm going to need to bring my Reader's Workshop work folder, whatever it is. I get a lot of feedback from teachers that this is a really helpful strategy for some kids to be able to visualize what they're doing in class and move through that when they're the kid who kind of like never pays attention to the board. That's just sort of super helpful. So the next little piece is we then want to move into planning. Now, I'll tell you what, I wasn't going to do this. Sarah, you're probably not going to be happy with me. I wasn't going to do this, but I am reading my room. And I have a lot of important information I want to get to you in the next hour, but I can see everybody's like, information overload. So what we're going to do, and to my virtual people, I think we need like a 8-minute stretch break. Is that cool with everybody? And a bathroom break. So we are going to come back right at 2:30. Please, is that the right time? Is that time correct? Quick stretch break, move your body, go to the bathroom, do your thing. If lucky people at home, grab your coffee. We're going to come right back at 2:30 and we'll power through and get you all the rest of the strategies. Enjoy your break. We're back on. Thank you. Sorry, everyone. I really, to be honest with you, I hated to lose the 10 to 15 minutes of content, but all of you were showing me like you needed a break. So that's cool. So I'm sorry, but it is what it is. So when we talk about planning, I think a lot of times we talk about how important it is for kids to do their work and engage and initiate. And I love this when you kind of want to do it, but not really. That's like one of my little favorite Nike things. So with planning, remember our number one goal is we want students to be able to visualize what will it look like when I'm done. And for that reason, and those of you that have heard me before, or you've probably seen it in the district, we developed the Get Ready, Do Done methodology. And the Get Ready, Do Done methodology, the goal is that we want students to learn to plan backwards to execute forwards. So the idea is, what will it look like when I'm done? What steps do I need to take to make it look like that? And what materials will I need? So that when I'm in the appropriate space and place, I can then just execute the plan. I can gather my materials, do my work, and know when to be done. And a big thing that we also talk about that is the fact that, yes, you can have a student where they know what their done goal is, they've identified what they need to do and the things they need. But for this slide, of course, and it's my reminder from last time, the big takeaway is that we have more students that are done with their work. They did the worksheet, they did it online, and that's awesome. They are done. But just because you're done with your work, are you actually done? No. You need to hand it in. You need to submit. You need to clean up. You need to gather your materials. There are so many students I work with in a classroom where, have you ever seen this? You have Trail of Daniel. You're like, there was Daniel, there he was, there he was, there he was. I mean, they just leave their things all over. So a big component of our program is this concept of what we call the get done. It's great that you're done with your work, like you finish the worksheet, but you're not done until you get done. And the get done means you've turned it in or you've cleaned it up. Get done can be everything from storing your materials, putting things away, charging your headphones for tomorrow, whatever it is. So one of the things that is so important with the get done is that we've actually incorporated it into agenda book planning. Now, I'm going to show you this not from the perspective of it's our planner, but I want you to be thinking globally about the process. When we made our academic agenda books, which we do sell, I mean, like, that's not the issue though, is we really incorporated the get ready, do done model into it. So this is where students can record their homework. This column represents the get ready. This is the due date and where they estimate the time that they need to do it. And this column represents the get done. Because again, I have so many kids that do homework and they don't go that extra step to process. How am I turning it in? So in this example, I'm going to do science. I need my books and binder. It's due Wednesday. I think I need about 15 minutes. And to get done, I need to make sure I share it. And for some kids where they need that 15-minute increments, it's a great way for them to do that planning. We also have a weekly calendar. But the bigger takeaway, and an elementary one, but the bigger takeaway is this. And again, bear with me because I'm going to show you two different kinds. You can have something like this or something like this. I find, and I don't know what your experience is, I have so many students right now that are saying to me, I don't need to use an agenda book. Everything is posted in Google Classroom. Do you guys hear this all the time? They're like, I don't need to write it down. But my find is that a lot of kids might not read to write it down, but here's what happens. They were assigned a math assignment on Monday that wasn't due until Wednesday. So on Monday, they're like, I'm going to do that on Tuesday. Tuesday rolls around, they get their new homework, but they forgot about the fact that they had math on Monday, and then they don't get it done, and it doesn't get turned in on Wednesday. And the other thing is, I find a lot of kids, when they open up Google Classroom, they go to math, and they're like, I have math. And all that's doing is it's getting their spatial temporal window of what do I need to do next? Do you know what I mean? As opposed to what is the evening going to look like? So one of my favorite things to do is I just like to make, in many ways, kind of the equivalent of like homework recording sheets that they can just sort of fill out at night. And I don't really make them copiously refill it out. It's just enough that they have the gestalt of what they need to do. So the student might say, yes, I have science. It was assigned today. I have to do my lab write-up. Now, I don't make them write the entire thing like lab write-up on catalysts and enzymes. I don't make them do that. I make sure that they know that they need their notes and they need their binder, that it's due, let's say, on Wednesday, and they think they only need about 15 minutes. So they're pre-imagining, but to get done, they have to hand it in on class. And I love to build in self-advocacy right there. Do I have any questions for the teacher? Do I need to email the teacher? Do I need to set up a time for like office hours? Well, I do have a question for the teacher, and to be thinking ahead about that. So then what they might do is they might say, I have math, and it's something that is due tomorrow. So it wasn't assigned today, I'm not working on it, but it's due tomorrow. Maybe I have to do that problem set. All I need is the handout. It too is due Wednesday, and I'm going to need about a half hour to do math, and I have to make sure that I submit it online. I don't need any help. Now, English, I'm sorry, my hand keeps clicking this. This is another great example. In English, I technically have no homework, but I'm working on a project, and I need to really print the pictures for that project. I've got the handout. It's not due until next Friday, but I should really spend just 10 minutes getting those pictures and store them. So it also helps kids expand that time horizon because they're visualizing what else is coming up. Now you have another option of this. If you really work in a resource room where you're having students break down homework, like how am I going to use my resource room time? Sometimes I will have students do the same thing, where they might say, I have ELA, I have to write that paragraph, I need my books and my binder, it's due, let's say, tomorrow, Thursday, I think I need about 15 minutes, and I need to make sure that I turn it in. Then what I might do is, let's say then they decide that they have math, that they're going to do that worksheet, and they need their handout, and they think that that's going to take them, it's due Thursday too, and they think that's going to take them 15 minutes. If they're in resource room, and let's say it's 10:15, I will sometimes students have them do their plan. I'm going to take 5 minutes to gather all my materials and get ready. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on my ELA writing up my paragraph. Then I'm probably going to need a few minutes to put all my things away. Then I'll only have about 10 minutes to work on my math, which means, because I have to clean up again too, I'm going to have to do some of my math at home tonight. So here is where I sometimes will have students, because if you notice this says 4 o'clock, I might have them in resource room begin to imagine what their evening looks like. Well, from 4 to 5 o'clock, I'm still going to be at field hockey. I get home, I'm probably going to shower, probably going to do dinner and chill out. I'm going to do my homework from 7 until 8:30. That's my homework block. And then I want to watch the Red Sox. Oh, come on. I'm a Massachusetts person. I didn't say the Patriots. All right. But now, to be told, I'm actually a Buccaneers fan because I like Tom Brady. Okay. But anyway, you guys get the idea. This, for some students, is a really great way for them to be planning out, how am I going to plan my time? So I love something like that with the whole purpose of being the get done. If you have students where they're already in elementary school, let's say the students are using an agenda book like that, or maybe you have a high schooler who's using an agenda book like that, then what I ask those kids to do is wherever they've done their work, they check off their work when they're done with the work. Then what I have the student do, sorry about that, is I have that student go back, and that's where I have them use their highlighter, and as soon as they get done, they've put it in the homework folder and in the backpack, or they've made a plan for turning it in, or their get done is they've submitted it, that's when I have them highlight it. Does that make sense? So that they're not only done, but they get done and they hand things in. So that's a little bit helpful with that. So as soon as we sort of get students to know the idea of like the get done, here broadly, by the way, is how we're going to introduce this. So when I introduce the Get Ready, Do Done model, really my number one goal is I want students to get to the point of automaticity that every time they have a task at almost a very subconscious level, their brain says, what will it look like when I'm done? Working backwards, what do I need to do to make it look like that? Working backwards, what will I need to get ready? That's where I want the student to go. So when we do this, the first thing we do, and it's very important because we're creating the mental imagination for it, our kind of scope and sequence is we create the planning space. So when I'm working with a student, and especially even in a group of students in a resource room, and I showed full class instruction last time I was here, I'll reinforce that a little bit today. We love to use planning mats, and I have given you planning mats in your large handout. I will say to the students, every single time you do a task, you want to ask yourself 3 questions. What will it look like when I'm done? And the done always goes to the right of the student. Then we ask ourselves, what do I need to do to make it look like that? The do goes in the middle. And then we ask ourselves, what will I need to get ready? And the get ready always goes to the left of the student. There's an entire reason why we've done this. We know that, as I've mentioned today, we are always planning along that spatial temporal window. Every one of you is doing it right now. What am I going to do after the presentation? What are the plans for dinner tonight? What email paperwork do I need to do tonight to be prepared for tomorrow? What's happening in classes tomorrow? What is coming up for this weekend? Do you know what I'm saying? You are constantly planning out like that. And we do that anticipatory look along something called the spatio-temporal frame. Let me go back to here. It has absolutely been proven that human beings imagine the future being ahead of us and to the right. We move into the future and away from the past. We think of our past as being a little bit behind our left shoulder. We plan like that. We plan thinking up and to the right, regardless of what direction you read and write. It doesn't matter. Now, I want you all to try something with me, and my virtual people, please try this too, all right? I'm going to turn my back because I want you to do it in the same direction. I want you all to really, really visualize doing laundry, all right? Like really separating the laundry, putting the laundry in the washing machine, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to look a little bit up and to the right, and I want you to whisper, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to do the laundry. And I want you to really picture it, okay? Everybody, you're going to do it right now. Ready? Look up and to the right and just say to yourself, I'm going to go home tonight and do the laundry. And really picture it. You're going to separate it, put it in the washer in the dryer. You guys go ahead. Ready? Say it to yourself. I'm going to what? Go home tonight and do the laundry. Okay, great. Now, here's what I want you to do. I now want you to look a little bit behind your left shoulder. Okay, a little bit behind your left shoulder. Same thing, you're going to really visualize, and I want you to say, I'm going to go home tonight and do the laundry. And really picture yourself putting the wash in the dryer, the whole thing. Ready? Go ahead. I'm going to go home tonight and do the laundry. And some of you might want to throw up. Not because of the laundry, but because it feels so weird to say, like even try it, say, I'm going to go home tonight and walk the dog, as opposed to, I'm going to go home tonight and walk the dog. It's weird, but neurologically, the brain doesn't think of it as being on that side. It doesn't matter if you're left or right-handed, by the way. It doesn't make a difference. So the fact of the matter is, our Get Ready, Do Done model is not about like, oh, cute little planning mats, isn't that fun? It has nothing to do with that. It's that we are absolutely teaching students how to develop their spatial temporal window and to anticipate what the work is going to look like. What is it going to look like when I'm done? What do I need to do, and what materials will I need to get ready? That's why we do it in that order, because it teaches that skill. So, and by the way, when I'm doing this with students, this is one of the very first things I teach. You can see this comes from I use the program Class Kick when I'm doing online learning. And I just have images up here. I say to students, all tasks have 3 parts. We always plan backwards. And I tell students, what 3 questions do we ask ourselves when planning? And I just get my students to say, what will it look like when I'm done? Working backwards, what do I need to do to make it look like that? Working backwards, what will I need to get ready? I'm always getting the student to kind of repeat that phrasing. Now, the next thing is especially when we look at anxiety, one of the 4 things that keeps anxious students moving forward is a lot of those kids do not have accurate thinking. They do not have the ability to accurately size up an assignment. Kids will either look at an assignment and be like, oh my gosh, it's going to take forever, or they might be like, that assignment, that's no biggie. And then all of a sudden when they go to do it, what do they realize? Ooh, it's a really big assignment. And they just can't size it up. And so my favorite example is if you have a student who's in resource room and you're like, oh, you got to work on your chem reading. They're like, sweet, I'm going to work on my chem. And they don't really size it up. They're like, yeah, okay, I'll get started on that. And they've got their Chromebook open and they got their stuff. And they may not utilize that time well because they haven't really sized up what is it that I need to do. So my favorite example, if you're not going to use planning mats like this with high schoolers, we have really small Post-it notes that say get ready, do done. You don't have to use our Post-it notes. You can write get ready, do done on a Post-it note. It doesn't have anything to do with that. So what we do is we say to the students, okay, if you leave resource room and you feel great about what you've gotten done, like you feel like you're kind of ahead of the game, what does that done goal look like? And we literally have the student lay it out. Now, if you say, yeah, but everything's online, there's nothing to lay out, then I would pull that up on the computer and we're going to visualize what is done look like. Well, I filled out this worksheet on the periodic table. Okay, work your way backwards. What do you need to do to get that worksheet filled out? Well, I have to look at the periodic table and I have to transfer information from the periodic table into the worksheet. Is that it? Well, no, there's some numbers that you have to calculate. Okay, how are you going to do those calculations? Well, I'm not really sure, but I have notes from school where I took a picture of the whiteboard. All right, so to get ready, you need to pull up the picture on your phone of the whiteboard. If you're doing calculations, we can use your calculator, and maybe we even need a pencil and a textbook, whatever it is. Now, what I love about this is the following. And again, I'm kind of turning my back to you as if I'm the student looking at this. I have a lot of students that when I work with them, especially when I'm working with them at school, if they think this is going to take them an hour and they don't have an hour in resource room, they're like, I'm not going to start it until I get home when I have an hour at home. Do you know what the kids I'm talking about? They don't want to just kind of like do part of it because they don't feel like they can break it into parts. They can't prioritize it that way. So I find it's really helpful to have students know how to prioritize that, because what they might realize is, well, I could do the easy part in resource room where I could just plug the numbers in, or would it make more sense in resource room to actually do the problems that require calculation where my teacher is here to help me? So now that I can kind of see the gestalt of it, I can make that plan. So I want to give you another really important trick/tip about executive functioning. And you can use this with all ages and kids. So, and I'm just going to move these for a minute so I don't keep stepping on them. Give me 1 second. And I'm going to be a little bit, oh shoot, I'm crunching for time because I want to make sure I get something to all of you. So here's the thing. You could write on the board, study for the test. Does that mean your students are going to study? No, there's no way. Now let's say you're a great resource room teacher or a great classroom teacher, you co-teach, and we go ahead and put the script on the board. Look at your study guide, make flashcards, have mom quiz you. Does that mean your students are going to study? There's no way. The only way you are going to study for a test is if you rehearse and pre-experience how you're going to go about that. So the thing about it is this. When we do an informal evaluation of kids, one of our informal assessments is we give kids examples of planning, and then what we say to them is, do you have anything coming up that you are planning for? A test, a soccer game, a Cub Scouts activity, a birthday party, whatever. And let's say a student says, yeah, I have a test coming up next Friday. I say, okay, tell me, how are you going to plan for that? Or they say, yeah, I have a Cub Scouts meeting. Okay, tell me, how are you going to plan for that? And I literally write down or I audio record the student's response. Now watch this. If a student says to me, well, I'm going to get the study guide, make flashcards, look over my homework, and have mom quiz me, do you know that I can tell you with 100% confidence that student is not going to study? You can too. Now, if I say to a student, oh, you got a test coming up on Friday, how are you going to study for it? And the student says to me, well, I was going to study with my friend Becca. We were thinking that we might go to Panera Bread and take the study guide. She'll do half, I'll do half, and we're going to put it into Quizlet, and then we'll share the Quizlet. And, you know, if I were smart, I should probably go online. There's like an online quiz from the textbook and take that so that I have a practice quiz. I can tell you with 100% confidence that student is absolutely going to study simply based on their language. Look at their language. I am going to study. We will meet at Panera. Maybe I'll use Quizlet. I should probably take a practice test. When we look at the research and we evaluate individuals who have strong executive function skills, the difference between weak and strong executive function skills is not only the visualization, but it is the presence or the absence of a specific type of self-talk. And that specific self-talk is what we call future self-talk, and it comes in two different forms. Plan A is what we call as I see it. I will, I am going to. When I get home, I'm going to put the laundry in the washing machine, and I'm going to take hamburger out of the freezer to defrost. Plan B are what we call the element of uncertainty. Maybe I'll do this, I should do that, in case that happens. Ironically, the more Plan B words you hear in a student's language, well, I could do that, maybe this, the better their executive function skills, because you know they have the ability to muse what it is that it's going to look like. So one of the things that we find that I absolutely love to do, and I included this in your electronic handout, I love to laminate future self-talk cards. All I do is I laminate a card like this. And when I have a student who is not very independent at planning, they're just not, I will absolutely give them a self-talk card, and I will ask them to make a stated intention plan. So you can give them scenarios like this. For example, at 7 p.m., Max is getting ready for a sleepover at a friend's house. He needs to pack items for the sleepover and trip to the community pool with his friend's family the following day. What are his stated intentions? I am going to pack my sleeping bag, and I literally just have kids circle them. They can just randomly choose them. I am going to, and in case. I am going to pack my sleeping bag. In case we go to pool first and back to his house, I should probably pack an extra change of clothes. When you force a student to use that language, they also will begin to do some of that visualization. So if I go back to this example here, if I have a student who still does not get started, we've done the planning and they still don't get started, I will pull out a future self-talk card and I'll say, okay, walk me through your plan for the next 20 minutes. Give me a plan A and a plan B. And again, I'll have the student say, I will and maybe. I will go through the periodic table and fill in what I know. And maybe if I get to the hard problems, I'll go to Mr. Peterson's office hours and see if he can show me what to do. That's all I do, is I have them sort of see that. Now, hold on to this, because I'm going to have this reappear as we go through the rest of the day. But it's another level 2 to help you kind of get your kids to advance through some of these strategies. If you are wondering about this, just very quickly, one of my other favorite things to do, I love to photograph and get students set up with this in school, and then I will say to them, go home and set it up at home and send me a picture of it set up at home, so that they can I know they're carrying it out at home, so that I can see that they're still doing that same planning. Now, this is a high school student there, same thing. They won't put the get ready, do done mats, but they'll send me a picture. My done goal was to work on my history. The worksheet is what I'm going to do, and these are the materials that I needed, whatever it is. So I love this example. This is a high school student that we worked with. Everything is set up, the get ready, do done. He's done his planning. We've taught him how to do it in the office. But the problem is, I want him to go home and generalize it. But he's a high schooler. He's not going to put get ready, do done at home. But as long as he sends me that imagery that, okay, there's the done goal, here's the get done, the backpack is left open to put things in and take things out, and the get ready, the materials are laid out, I'm good with that. That way I know that they're at least sort of thinking and walking through that process at home. So that's a good way to generalize it if you need a little bit of support for that. So when it comes to the classroom, remember, one of the things that I find that happens all the time is teachers often verbalize directions in the classroom. And remember, I talked about the fact that I love teachers to do the tiny tweak. And here's the tiny tweak. Almost every time I meet with classroom teachers will say to me, I got a brand new reading curriculum, I got a brand new writing curriculum, I don't have time to teach executive function. And my response back is, I don't want you to look at it like that. I want you to do what you're doing, teach your math, teach your reading, whatever it is. But every teacher I know puts directions on the board. All I want teachers to do is to change the location of where they write their directions. If this is what you normally put on the board, I wouldn't do that, because first of all, I don't know what you find out, but I find there are a lot of students that you can give them graphic organizers, they will fill out an organizer, but they never use it to actually write from. Do you know what I'm talking about? They don't make that connection. So instead of doing this, I would have put it on the board using get ready, do done. Class, our done goal is, by the end of class, you have written your short paragraph on who your historical figure is. To do that, we're going to be selecting and reading our biographies, and as we're reading, we're filling out our vocabulary bookmarks, because you will need to use at least, let me just change my ink on that for 1 second. Let me go back to where I was. There we go, like this. You will need to use at least 1, 2 of your vocabulary words in your paragraph. As you read and you take notes on your organizer, these are the character traits, that's why the person is famous, these are interesting facts. Your character traits will go here. Your reason they're famous will go there, etc. You get the idea. It's just a great way for students to suddenly see the gestalt of what they need to be doing in that class period. So I really love this example. I worked in a math classroom in Massachusetts where the teacher said to me, she goes, I am so frustrated. She said, this is an inclusion classroom. She said, some of the kids are functioning at this level in math and some are functioning at this level. And she said, it takes us forever to get through in-class activities because some kids fly through it and other kids take forever. She said, so for example, today, kids are going to be filling out this worksheet where they're going to be measuring 6 circular objects. They have to measure the circumference and the diameter and calculate the radius. And she said, it will take us 2 40-minute class periods. I'm like, yikes, that's a lot. So what we did is, instead of just having her like review the formula on the board, we did this. Right before class, I put Get Ready, Do Done up on the board, and I just did a clip art of what the worksheet looked like. And right before class, I mean literally this was seconds before the class, I asked one student to show me what it looked like to measure diameter and what it looked like to measure circumference. Then what we did is we said to the students, your done goal at the end of class is to measure 6 circular objects. To do that, we're going to be measuring the circumference around and the diameter across and recording those measurements and then using those measurements to calculate radius. And we went through what that looked like. Then we invited the students. So what do you think you're going to need today to do this task? One kid says an object. Someone else says a tape measure. Someone else says maybe we could use graph paper for our calculations. That's great, and the students write it here. Now, it was really interesting. This is up on the board. Class starts. I walk around to the back of the room, and there's this girl who's paying 0 attention, like nothing. And I said, how's it going? She's like, oh, like she got caught, right? And I said, okay. I said, what is your done goal by the end of class? And she looks at me, and I said, look up at the board. I said, what is your done goal? And she goes, that. And she just points to it. I said, what is that? She goes, a worksheet. And I said, okay, what do you need to do? And it was amazing. She goes, oh, well, I guess we need to measure around and across. So that gives me the opportunity to say around is circumference, across is diameter. And then we talked about what materials she needed. She immediately jumped up, she went right over, she grabbed her object and came back. The whole class was done measuring all 6 objects in like 20 minutes. The teacher's like, I can't believe it. It is that easy, and it makes a big difference in a classroom to be able to see that. So the thing about it is, if you have a classroom teacher that is doing this, a really cool trick is, if they're doing this on a smart board, print out the smart board and give that printout to individual students. And that's where you can differentiate your instruction. If this girl needs to work on expanding sentences, I can put it there. Whereas this student needs to work on editing, I can put on editing in his get done. So you can differentiate the instruction that way. That's a very cool tool too. Now, if you're doing this in a resource room, one of my favorite things to do is to put the Get Ready, Do Done up on the board for the resource room. So the done goal is that by the time the student has left, they have planned, started, and perhaps completed a homework assignment. To do that, the first thing they have to do is check in. Where are they at as a student? I find a lot of kids aren't in the habit of checking Google Classroom and just checking in. Do I have any missing assignments? Where am I at? Do I need to go talk to the teacher? And then I've planned my time. What is my done goal? what do I need to do, and what do I need to get ready. I find for some students, just beginning to sort of know that what do you need to do in resource time, check in as a student, and get an assignment done is a really helpful way. The other thing is, I'm often talking a lot about with students is before you do your work, know your time robbers and your time savers. So another quick thing, and I'm watching my time for a minute. I sort of did a little bit of these examples, so I'm just going to do something for 1 second because I have some really cool tricks I want to get to you. Once the teacher has modeled the planning in the classroom, here's the done goal, here's what we're going to do, here's what we need to get ready. As we move through the scope and sequence of this, we go from modeling planning to now actually inviting the students to do the planning. We want them to participate and begin to do the problem solving. So I'm going to kind of show you examples of this from all ages. So if you're working with the younger grades, and let's say we know that students are going to be making a snail in class to represent spring and the S sound, I might show the students what the snail looks like. We can have out the materials they need to get ready, but then we're inviting them to plan. Who can tell me what is one step you think we're going to need to do? And someone says, cut out the snail. Okay, great, we're going to need to cut it out. I can write cut on a sticky note. Then someone says, well, we're going to need to roll the snail up. Okay, great, we're going to need to roll it. Once they've identified all the steps, then with the students, we can actually work on sequencing to figure out, well, what's the most logical order we should do that in? So we can actually begin to break down the sequencing of that too. Now, as another example, and I have kind of this particular photograph pains my heart, and here's the reason why. I have a lot of teachers that talk to me about students like this, where you have an in-class assignment. It may or may not be difficult, right? Students are going to be drawing a picture of what they observe and writing a sentence. And kids will not initiate. They sit there. And they don't start until you come over and say, now go do this. And they might do that, and then they come to a grinding halt. Do you know the kids I'm talking about? So in that case, one of my favorite things to do, especially in the younger grades, I like to make trifold planning boards. Now, your cheap, easy way to make a trifold planning board, take 2 manila folders, and then what you want to do is glue them together in the center like this, and then it's the exact size of construction paper. You can add a get ready, do, and done. And they're great because I can go up to a student's desk and I can lay all that planning mat out right on a desk. If we don't finish that work, I can close it up and put it away and then take it back out when we need to. So that's kind of a cool trick for that. But one reason why I like this is I can, same thing, really say to a student, well, our done goal is to really observe caterpillars. What does the word observe mean? And we can break down what we're actually talking about. It means to go look. So we need to go look, put that on a sticky note. Then what do we need to do? Well, we should probably talk about, when we observe something, we talk about our observations. But now we want to record them so we can remember them. So we're going to draw a picture, and then we're going to write a sentence. And then, yes, the student can lay out the materials that they need. But what I love about this is students can be way more independent because they can take that sticky note, they go look at the caterpillars. They come back, they take the mouth, they come tell you about it. They come back, now they know that they need to draw this. Now, the only thing about an assignment like this is the most difficult transition for students is going from a preferred to a non-preferred task. Everyone know what I'm talking about? And the thing is that for some students, writing like this is a totally non-preferred task. And that leap to going from go color to go write is really difficult. So I wanted to tell you that one of the ways that we do this, and this is the work of Jessica Minahan, is we build something called behavioral momentum. And when we do behavioral momentum, we want to insert a lesser preferred task. But the lesser preferred task should at least contain something that gets the student in the seat, like pencil in hand. In other words, I don't want to say, oh, to that student, well, why don't you go color pictures of your own kind, which is a lesser preferred task but keeps you busy, and then we'll do the non-preferred. No. I want them to do something which may not be writing, but at least it gets pencil in paper. So what I might have that student do, oh sorry, I have an animation, a glitch there, is I might have them just make what I call a personalized word bank. I love with written expression as a strategy to have kids just generate word banks on their own. So if I'm going to be writing, I might just have them make a list of and write words of what they see. Caterpillar, leaf, stripes. Even if sometimes they need to dictate to that to you, I might start and they might put the ending sound on, that they write the ending sound. The reason why I love that is, now that I've got that word bank, the leap to writing the sentences is so much easier because I already have the words, I already have that spelling right there. So I also love to use what I call word bank brainstorms. You have a large copy of this in your electronic handout. If I have kids who have a hard time retrieving words, I just remind them that we can think of people, places, and things, physical actions, mental actions. A physical action is like jump. A mental action is dream, hope, think, wonder. And let's say I want students to write about, what did you do over Halloween? I might give them a Halloween picture and I might say, let's just brainstorm Halloween words. Now the student has pencil in hand and we're just writing Halloween words. Trick-or-treaters, children, costumes, mom and dads, candy giver, pumpkins. What were some of the places, houses? What were some of the things? Decorations, jack-o'-lanterns, spiders. I hoped that I got a really big Kit Kat bar, whatever it is. Now the leap to writing is not that far. So we absolutely love to have our students do that. Again, I'm just going to jump a slide for 1 minute. If you have a student who's combining the done goal with the time, great thing for them is to write down what are the steps that they see themselves doing, and then figure out their time frame for doing that. I'm going to take 5 minutes to just rewrite all the words. I only need a minute to write that full sentence, and then that'll give me a nice 10 minutes to draw my picture. So you can kind of combine that clock and the steps of what they want to do. Now, I wanted to get somewhere for a reason. I know I'm jumping just a little bit, but I'm feeling my own anxiety of time, and there's something really important I want to show you. One other thing about the Get Ready, Do Done model, I love, for some students, I love to use arts and crafts, and I find one of the most motivating arts and crafts are do-it-yourself pet toys. Kids love to make toys for their pets. But what I'll do is, if I have a child who's pretty inflexible, I will have them start with a done goal, and then I will have them identify a plan B goal. If plan A doesn't work out, what is your plan B goal? And I will just have them identify that. So if my plan A goal is, I'm going to use a tennis ball, but if I can't find a tennis ball, then my plan B goal is to use a lacrosse ball. So I'm already building in some of that cognitive flexibility. Now, the next thing about this is that as we move students along, at some point, one of the biggest problems is that when we're inviting students to plan, their assignments are going to be very open-ended. When we move an assignment to an open-ended assignment, we have to do two things. First of all, the problem with open-ended assignments is they are a ton of directions, and all of these directions tend to trigger verbal working memory, when we know we want our students to access nonverbal working memory. So for that reason, we teach students to take the directions and visualize what the directions are asking them to do by doing a technique called Be a Future Sketcher. In order to be a future sketcher, first need to know, well, how do I break down directions? The easiest way to teach a student to break down directions is it's like an adapted version of Bonnie Singer's Empower Writing program. We teach students to circle the action word and underline the key idea. And that is really cool because when kids look for the action words, they're visualizing actions that they're going to do. Think is an action word, write is an action word, tell is an action word, include. And then they underline that action because now I can come back and I can rehearse what am I thinking about is a time I did something special. What am I writing? A story. Well, now I need to visualize what a story looks like. A story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. What am I telling in my story? Something memorable. What am I including in my story? So it's a great way to do that. So when you have your students practice this, have them identify the action word. Discuss is the action word. What am I discussing? Differences between bacteria and bacteria. Can you tell I'm tired? Virus and bacteria cells. When you combine virus and bacteria, you get bacteria. And there you go. Discuss. What am I discussing? The key points. So we love to do that. Once a student has identified the action word, we love them to do what is called a little future sketch. It's not a drawing. We just have them make a little sketch of what it's going to look like. So if I'm going to do a Dear Diary entry, it's like I'm picturing a page where it says, Dear Diary, I have to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences and a signature. That's what that assignment is going to look like. So if I have to sketch a diagram of a flower with the parts of the flower labeled, I'm picturing a flower and then I'm like labeling the parts. If I have to sketch a recording page for an interview, I'm making a table, I'm going to have a question and an answer, and I'm including the ideas. It is the easiest thing ever for kids to just do a little future sketch of what it's going to look like. Let me give you a really good example. It says, write a 1-paragraph summary of the book that includes all the parts of a story. Type of story, main character, setting, main conflict, and a cliffhanger question that does not give away the ending of the book. Do you know how hard that is for kids? What if I read Harry Potter and I have to write a 1-paragraph summary? You just completely stressed me out. And again, a lot of teachers will give kids a graphic organizer. Don't get me wrong, I love myself a really good graphic organizer. But does a graphic organizer represent get ready, do, or done? What does it represent? The do or the get ready. It's not the done, because the done goal was not to turn in a graphic organizer. The done goal was a paragraph summary. So we need the student to know, well, what does a paragraph summary look like? Well, if I'm writing a paragraph, then I'm only turning in a piece of paper. I ask my students, on average, how many sentences is a paragraph? It'll depend upon the age, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to 10. Let's go with 5 to 7. All right, so we indent that first sentence. We're picturing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll put in 6. 5 to 7 might be 5, might be 7. Now let's visualize what we have to include. I have to include what is my type of story and who are my characters. And I might say, for example, I read Harry Potter, which was a fantasy story. The characters were Harry, and I have to include the setting. Now, you could put characters. I could put that I include the setting. I then have to have a sentence on what was the conflict. Now, I have a few more sentences here. So maybe I talk about a way that the character kind of dealt with the conflict. I might have a sentence about that. And then I have my cliffhanger question. Will Harry, become a wizard? And then in the very end, I'm going to have my concluding sentence, something like, you should definitely read this book to find out, right? So I might have my concluding sentence here. And when a student, sorry, I'm having a pencil glitch. When a student suddenly visualizes what this is going to look like, It's amazing. All of a sudden, they've sized it up, and it makes it easy. Now, I am going to let this play for 1 minute. It's killing me because I'm watching my time. But I think it's a really good one for you to see. This boy does have dyslexia, so you're going to see some dyslexia errors on here. But he's been given this assignment, and he has to figure out, when he turns this in, what is it going to look like? Oh, do we not have sound? So he's visualizing that sentences start with a capital. That's why he's doing the mountain at the top. And he's run out of a little room. Dis means he's included description. So notice he looks back at the direction and he's visualizing, okay, I know I need to include my concluding sentence there. So that's as easy as what a future sketch is. They're just really visualizing, what is this assignment going to look like? And it's great because as they see that, then they sort of know what it's going to look like when they write from it. So another example of this, if I give you like the older version example of it, is this. It says, we've been learning about characters and conflicts. Write an essay about a character in the book. What conflict were they experiencing? How did the character change from the beginning to the end of the book? Do you think it was positive or negative? Explain. Again, not helpful to start there. Much more helpful for a student to know, what is it going to look like when I turn it in? And here's where I'm going to have that student do that future sketch. Well, I know an essay, first paragraph's an introduction, last paragraph's a conclusion. I know I have to write about what the character was in conflict. What was the character like in the beginning? What were they like in the end? And what was my opinion of that? And I have to include evidence. It's amazing when a student sketches it out and they can see what it looks like, how much easier it is for them to initiate the writing process. Now, I'm going to take a moment and I want to end on something that I think is a really powerful executive function writing strategy for a lot of you. And this is what this is. To me, one of the hardest leaps with executive function and written expression is, even if a student has a future sketch, even if a student has a graphic organizer, I find that as soon as the student pulls up that blank Google Doc or that blank work, do you ever find that that's where students freeze? They just can't get started. I want to take my last few minutes and show you an amazing little technology trick for students. So let's imagine you have a student who has an assignment like this, where it's the current event assignment. They have to, in your own words, briefly summarize the content of the article, 4-sentence minimum. Then they have to do the analysis. What are the positions held by the people? How do you feel about the event? How could this event affect you? And then the impact. What is the event or significance, etc. Again, I find that really hard for my students. Do you guys find it hard for kids to write that? So my favorite thing to do is we use a trick called tables to text for written expression. And this is truly for your kids with pretty impaired executive function who can't initiate the writing process. All of the directions for this are in your handout, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show this to you on Microsoft Word. So the first thing that we do is when we go into Word and or Google Docs, and I will show you on Google Docs in 1 second, just bear with me. On our blank page, what we do is we insert a 2-column table. In the left-hand column, with the student, we type up the questions that are to be answered in the essay. In other words, if I'm summarizing my current event, these were the questions we came up. Who was in the event? What kind of an event was it? When was it? Where was it? Who? All the classic, who, what, when, where, why questions. Then what you ask the student to do is you ask the student to literally write the answer to the question in full and complete sentences. So in this example, what is the event? This student was writing about the miner event. Miners who have been thinking and got trapped were rescued after spending 69 days underground. What kind of an event was it? It was a dramatic rescue. And the student goes through and they answer every single question. Now the beauty of this is tenfold, but here's the couple of key things. First of all, the student can immediately edit and see, did I start every single sentence with a capital? And does every one of my single sentences have a period? I can already see that. The other thing is I can do this. Bear with me for just 1 second because I realized that I corrected this for a minute. If I had done this, and let me just do one more thing for a minute. Sorry, I had saved this from before. One thing nice about this, if a student looks at this, they can see I started that sentence with the miners, this sentence starts with the miners, that sentence starts with the miners, that sentence starts with the miners. See how I can see it right away? Ooh, I started every single sentence with the miners. Maybe I should make that variable. I could change this to the brave men. Maybe I could change this one to they. Anyway, do you guys see how I'm kind of doing the editing right there? Now here's the magic. Once they've written in full sentences, you select all of their answers and you copy it. If I go to a new blank document, I do not want to do the classic like Command V to paste it. That will paste it as a table. Don't do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is, if you're using a PC, you right-click and you choose the A, that pastes it without the table. If you are using a MacBook or a Mac, you go to Paste, you choose Paste Special, and you choose to paste it as unformatted text. Again, all these directions are in your handout, and you click OK. Now the beauty of it is, all I have to do is delete the return at the end, and guess what this student has? A totally organized, complete, and full paragraph. And it is pretty awesome. Miners who've been mining got trapped, were rescued after spending 69 days underground. It was an international rescue team, etc. If you are using Google Docs, the process is just a little bit different. So for example, I forgot to do one thing. Give me just one hot second. I'm just going to do this for 1 minute. Let me delete that column and let me insert my column to the right. Okay. So again, if I come back here, I'm so sorry. I forgot to do something. I rushed over here from the other school and I forgot to do this. So give me just 1 second. Ignore what I'm doing for 1 minute. Sorry. Okay. So again, if I had to set this up, like what are the positions held by the people? How do I feel about the event or issue? Now this is the exact same thing in a Google Doc, but Google Docs are a little bit different. So the student answers the question in full and complete sentences. Tornadoes, touchdown in Florida last night. Where did the event take place? They were in the Florida Keys. When was this event? How long did it last? Well, I already said last night, so I can say the tornadoes started at 5 p.m. and lasted 15 minutes, but were destructive. Okay, I'm writing my full sentences. Who goes or participates? The firemen arrived to help rescue the survivors, whatever. Pardon my typing and spelling errors. In Google Docs, watch what happens. You select the answers, you go to Format, you go to Table, and you choose Merge Cells. And now what it does is it puts the whole thing together for you there, and now the student has a nice organized paragraph. I can copy that and paste it on a blank doc and turn it in. Now, some English teachers will say to me, I am not comfortable with this. I feel like it's going to lose the flow of writing. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like that ability to just kind of flow through sentences. But for my students with executive function challenges, I often find they can't hold all of this in working memory, and so their paragraphs end up being very disorganized when they're staring at the blank page. So if you still want a student to have the flow and not be quite so formulaic about it, I like to select the table, go to Format, go to Table, and merge cells. And now I have the student type their sentences like this is like a mini word processing screen. Does that make sense? And then they answer the questions there. What were the positions held by the people? Many scientists believe this was global warming that accounted for the tornadoes. How do I feel about this? I agree. Global warming is a major issue on Earth. Next question. How do I feel this event affected me? Even in Massachusetts, we had tornadoes, which is unusual for our area. But anyway, do you get the idea? They still have that question right there to guide them, and that's great for working memory. So I find a lot of times if I have something like this, I actually help the student generate the questions to be answered. So the question might be, what game do I enjoy playing? A supporting detail, I might say, what do I like about it? I might say why I like it so much, and another reason why I like it so much, and then I have a conclusion sentence. So I'm making the students come up with the questions there. So I wanted you to see that because from an executive function lens, it's a great way for students to see what they're going to write about, hold that writing prompt in working memory, and work towards it. And it's a great workaround for kids who really, really struggle with written expression. So I hope you found that helpful. All of that is in your, all the directions on how to do that are right here in your handout. So with all of that in mind, I know I'm probably to the point that I need to wrap it up, and I know you have an announcement or two. There are a few other slides in your handout about kind of like creating strategy notebooks. I love to put strategies in notebooks. If teachers have strategies that are on the walls in the classroom, I love to photograph what's on the walls and put them into the student's strategy notebook so that they own those strategies. And my other favorite trick is I love to create Google Docs where the student has their strategies hyperlinked so that the student is saying, oh, okay, I know that I need to, for example, organize my materials. I'm going to use this strategy. I know that I need to do a longer term assignment. I'm going to use my future sketch strategy. And to just give you an example of what this looks like, and Sarah, you walk up so that you're here to talk as I show everyone this one. So my favorite way to do this, for example, is like this. I just put it in a Google Doc so that the student knows, okay, like my goal is I need to study for an exam. To do that, I need to review how I did on the last test. My strategy is my test review strategy, and then I hyperlink that so that the student can access it right there. Does that make sense? It's a great way for kids to be able to just use their tools. All right, so with that in mind, I have a closing slide that has all of my closing information on it. Stuff like that. You can definitely reach out to me, check out my website. I hope you got something new. Have a good fall. And announcements.
I was actually just on this website earlier. I'm actually thinking how I can have my son teletherapy with Sarah from Denver to Boston. I emailed all the online and in-person participants. If you registered through SCED, like you have to follow that process. I emailed you the attendance information, so how to take attendance, so you can get your credit and have this class added to your transcript. All that should be in your email right now. It did go out about an hour ago. So if you didn't register through Canvas, be sure you go back and register through Canvas, and then we'll guide you through that process. You have until tomorrow afternoon to get your code in there for attendance. That's all we have for you today. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I do have a little